Good morning, everyone. What is today? Today is Wednesday, February 21st, and right at 8:01 a.m. Pacific time. And this is the last of our ORMAP training sessions for this group. So let's start with just sort of what I call homework, which is basically group reminders. What is it that we learned over the last 3 days that you're going to take away from this, that you found interesting, that you found you were hopefully going to use on here? So why don't we see if we can get everybody to give us two of these today? So who wants to start?
I'll start. I really liked how yesterday, for example, one of many things, but just really focusing on, for me, because I'm so new at this, kind of finding, you went over the 5 primary tools to remove the gaps and overlaps. For me, kind of narrowing down where I need to go, it was helpful because I'm still navigating all this. And I also liked how you went over how you do the numbering of the subdivisions and how you can change that around. I just did one, it was only a small one, a 9-lot subdivision, but that would have been really helpful.
Yeah,
So I really appreciate that. And the fundamentals are really key right now. So thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you found that useful. Yeah, I overall I tend to I like what Esri has done with some of these tools, and after some input from many of us out there that are using these every single day, I think they've got some consistent tools now that we can work with. Yeah, thanks, Summer. Who's next?
I really liked the update they did to the Kogo. I think it's really slick that you can enter in 1, 2, 3, or 4 at the end. You know, if you want to go to the northeast or the southwest quadrant. When I first tried it, I was ripping my hair out because I couldn't figure out how it worked. But now I have an understanding of it. And I think it's really nice where you can just put in an angle, you know, plus 45, and it'll take it. It knows what you're trying to do. So really excited with Kogo because I use that quite a bit in what we do. And then just the topology, being able to do that in the parcel fabric, I think was really, really nice.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thanks, Greg. The Traverse tool specifically, they have got so many nice things in there. The ability to go and we take it for granted, but the ability to go and in the grid make arithmetic, add and subtract and say, okay, this overall line is supposed to be this plus this plus this plus this. For years, I used to have a calculator on my desk, and I would go through and calculate what those values are and then input that into the Traverse. You don't need to do that anymore. They finally recognize that's an integral part of the workflow that we all sort of follow. And I really like that. The topology, I receive mixed feelings about it when I go and teach people about it, because some people think that our topology should be more complex than that. I personally don't think so. I use topology for what it is, but right now inside the parcel fabric, the topology really does nothing more than ensure that your parcel contains a polygon, lines, and points. That's all it does. It doesn't look at spatial relationships between other parcels. It doesn't look at relationships between layers, because the data models that Esri is sort of looking through, and I see that my webcam is frozen. I don't know why. But the data models are such that it really is up to you to determine whether or not that's really going to be needed as part of your analysis or not. So we'll see what happens there. Let me go and stop my video and then start it again and see if that's better. Okay, see if it was frozen for a reason. I seem to have good connectivity, but yeah, those are really nice. And like I said, we usually have a lot of discussion about topology, and we've been ingrained since ArcInfo to think that's critical to what we do, but maybe it's not. Maybe we should have just been using topology to tell us, are there gaps or overlaps? Well, we've got tools now that tells us gaps or overlaps. It really doesn't, and as we extend our data model, things like condominiums and stacked parcels and subterranean, subsurface parcels and things like that, we do need stacked. We need to have things that overlap on top of one another. So, yeah, I think topology and the way we think about topology is changing, and it's going to continue to change. Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Who's next?
Good morning, Frank.
Good morning.
I even was thinking about it last night. I'm really excited to use the trace in Pro. I feel like I'm going to use that daily. Trace with an offset, so easy to tab and switch to the other side of the line. Like I'm super excited about that tool. That would save me, I don't even know how many hours. Like, so I'm really, really excited about that one. Yeah, and like Craig was saying too, the quality check, I love that where, you can see if things aren't lining up, and because that sometimes is hard for me to see where my mess up is. So
And it's much more convenient. It's right there,
yeah,
and it doesn't take a lot of time to go and check to see, oh, how is this fitting together? So
yeah,
it's not like what we used to do with topology. It's just there. We can check it anytime we want.
yeah, it's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. The trace and the offset, by the way, that was in ArcMap.
It
That's
is
yeah, that's in
where? No.
ArcMap.
Okay, I'll
Same
try to
thing.
find it.
Same thing. You go to draw a line or anything, and there's a trace tool on the mini construction toolbar. And
Yeah.
if you just hit O, it will allow you to go and show all the options on it. It's there.
Oh,
It's always been
Frank,
there. It's just
yay.
hidden.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. It's not like that was a new thing, but it was something that's a little bit more exposed. So thank you. Yeah. Who's next? Who's next?
I'll go.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing Erica did about the trace tool, and I didn't know it was in ArcMap either. But in related to that is it's just nice that there are different ways to accomplish the same thing. You can use CompuLines 2 and do it that way. You can do split. You can do various methods of doing the same thing depending on what your preference is or depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, I'd like to have you all take that away from this, is that this isn't one way where they're locking you into doing it one way. If you have a favorite way, or if you have a way that you're very comfortable doing, go ahead and do it that way. Just know that as it relates to the parcel fabric, you can always just run, as long as you have an active record, you can always run build and make sure that it puts in place anything that's missing. So yeah, don't think there's only one way to do any of these things. It's always all kinds of things, all kinds of ways to go and accomplish the same thing. Good points.
And the other thing is, you mentioned the shortcuts for Kogo, and I did print them out. But I had thought there was a way of a shortcut for changing the distance into chains, and I didn't see chains as an option there.
So two things have to be in place for you to be able to do that. Let's go over here. Let's pull this up. Let me start
I saw
editing
you
first.
added chains yesterday into the.
That's the first thing, is that you have to have chains defined as one of your units that are available for going and working with it. It doesn't mean it has to be a default. It just has to be available. Has to be on this list on here. And you just do that by going over again. Go to Backstage, go to your options, go to units, and then go down here and pull down those units that you think you're going to be using or that you deal with often enough. And again, you can make sure there's yards and perches and any of those that you might want to go and ever have available to you. It's got to be on that list. And then when we're over in the traverse, again, it literally is let's go in, anything in here. All right. If it's on that list, it's available on the pull down. All right. So it's got to be defined on that list. And then once it's on the list, it's available on the pull down. And if you know what that abbreviation is, you can just type it in, or you can use that pull down. It depends on whether you're looking at a GUI interface or whether you're used to typing. But it's available. It's always there. Always there. And by the way, that happens anywhere where you can input values. So for example, if I go over here to my drawing area and I go to my distance, I can then go and have the same thing. I can change it to a different unit if I want on there. I have the ability to use those shortcuts anywhere where there is input being requested from me for what the linear units are. All right. Thank you. Thank you. That brings up to me, it reminds me of something in that I'm not sure I actually talked about this yet. This is, in fact, there is an element here. You'll note that when I'm going and doing these drawings and everything else, I have nothing else on my screen. However, inside of Pro, there is constraints where you can have it visually show you information. And it's on the bottom of the display area, and it's the third one from the left. And on here, if I turn on my constraints, you will see as I'm drawing, it's telling me what the direction of that line is and what the distance is over there. All right. I can go and do that. And it will go and display that there for me. So it's a way for me to go in if I visually need that, a way to see what is the bearing of the rubber band that I'm doing, how far is it? And some of my clients actually use this as a shortcut to measurement. Oh, how far is it from this point to this point here? And what about to the middle of this? How far is it over to that line? So it's a way to go and turn that on. And once it's set up, it's just quick, a toggle on and off for you to go and do. That's on the bottom here. It's sort of in the middle of the areas, the setting areas that you can turn on and off. And it's just a toggle back and forth. And I've set it to absolute direction. And the default constraint is to show me the direction on here. And again, as I go in here, turn it back on, there it's on again and showing me what that is. Again, I sometimes fail to mention it because I don't use it, but I know when I look at some of my clients and what they're doing, they often will use it. And it's like, okay, well, that's why there's Neapolitan ice cream, right? Everybody has a different way of looking at things in different flavors. All right. Who's next? Who hasn't said anything yet?
I'll go. I really like that merge points tool that we looked at yesterday.
Yeah.
In the past, we've had to do a lot of cleanup, and that would have been really, really helpful to have. And I like how it can move the lines and the polygons, everything with one shot. It makes it a lot easier. We've done a lot of like having zipping, trying to zip things together, and add vertices to get the lines to match up. And so that's a really slick tool that would be very, very helpful, I think.
Yeah, it is a nice tool to clean up. You want to, with anything else, you want to be careful, make sure that you really wanted to do that. But it is a really nice tool.
Now, one question I did have was about the cul-de-sac tool we were looking at yesterday. It was built off when you build the center line from the street, right? That's how you use the
Yes.
cul-de-sac off the center
Yeah,
line. So
you use a center line to go and construct everything from it.
so then when you construct, I looked. So when you, let's say the street was, 60 feet wide, so you're drawing the center line, so it's 30 on each side. When you're using the cul-de-sac tool, didn't necessarily look like if you did an offset off the center line, if it would match up, or would you co-go off of the endpoints of the cul-de-sac that you just created? Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
So, perfect sense. So, let me go and show you. Again, these are the tools. Sometimes you use all the tools the way they're supposed to be used. Other times, we have found internally within our team that there's kind of better ways of doing it. So by default, they think that what you're going to do is this. You're going to go and build a line, and then you're going to go to, sorry, wrong tab, wrong pane. Then you're going to go to the cul-de-sac tool, and you're going to go and use that cul-de-sac tool and tell it that you want to go and do it at the end of the line, and the street width is going to be 60 feet wide, and your main radius is going to be 100 feet wide, right? And you're going to have a return radius of, let's say 15 feet wide on here. That's not the way we tend to do it. We'll go and we'll often go and just do this. If we're going to use this at all, just do it that way and let it create that, sorry, without these returns. And then we'll go in here and we'll select that line and we'll parallel the line. And sorry, parallel the line here, and we'll parallel the line 30 feet on both sides, and we'll create that. And then we'll go in, and in this case, again, unfortunately, I wouldn't have created that one first. Usually we'll do without this return. So it's that way. And then we'll use the radius tool, the fillet tool, with a fixed radius. In this case, we made a 15-foot radius. And we'll use this tool to go and say between here and here, there it is there. And here and here, there it is there. Because the fillet tool automatically trims things up, automatically makes sure that it all matches. Because we have found that if we put this return radius in, often it doesn't exactly match. It might be a thousandths off, but it's enough off that there's a consistency when you're building seats. So we will leave off the return radius and instead use what I call old school mapping. We'll go and do the center line, then we'll do the offsets for the rights of way. We'll put cul-de-sacs on the end. Then we'll go in and we'll do all the return radiuses, or what we down here call safe site corners, where the curves between two street center lines. We'll do all of that using old school type tools, the fillet tool and things like that on here if we're building the subdivision. So often the way Esri thinks you're going to use the tool is not always the way it's most efficient to go and build it. But I like it. It's I started making the comment that those of us that have done this for a long time know how to really quickly build cul-de-sacs. So it's not like the tool's giving us a whole lot of support, but it's out there. It's something that you can at least identify with. So thanks, Gabe. Who else?
I guess that leaves me. I think the fillet tool is really cool. I've never used it before. I wish I had. Would have saved a lot of time.
Yeah,
Let's see. At setup, I like how you can kind of control your editing and toggle some features that you want on and off, like you've shown in distance units you can have when you Kogo. That's super cool.
yeah, yeah. I agree. The fillet tool, while we're here, just sort of to remind you, the fillet tool has a couple options, like anything else. Um, you can have it as a non-fixed radius in which you're just looking at this line, and then it gives you the four corners of that intersection. You can put it on this side, you can put it on this side, you can put it on this side, you can put it on this side. Built into the fillet tool in ArcGIS Pro is automatically trimming these things. So just be aware that it will automatically trim what's on here. And if you have a fixed radius in here, let's go in here a little bit. And I can tell it put it in this corner, it will automatically trim everything up for it. So it's a really nice tool for that purpose. But you just sort of have to know, like anything else, you have to know how the tool works on there.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
slick. I have one more thing. This is kind of silly, but when you select a bunch of things, features or whatever, you have a way of unselecting some, and I don't see how you're doing it. I'm trying to watch, but you'll have a bunch selected, then you'll unselect what you don't want.
So
Go ahead.
thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. I sometimes take this for granted because I'm doing it so often, so long. So inside of ArcGIS Pro, a selection, again, we have the ability to do multiple types of selections. We can select by a rectangle, which always was the default in ArcMap. We can select by drawing a polygon, by doing a lasso, by a circle, a line, a trace. We have a lot of different ways to select things. But then we have to learn how to add to the selection or subtract from the selection. All right. ArcGIS Pro is just like ArcMap for adding things to the selection. In that if I hold down my shift key, it will add to my selection. However, it differs from ArcMap in that if I hold down my shift key and click on that again, it does not remove it from the selection. Remove from the selection is actually the control key. So if I hold down the control key, it will remove it from the selection. So remove from the selection, shift key, add to the selection, shift key, add, shift key, add. All right, so it will, the shift and the control keys, shift adds, control removes. That's a muscle memory thing you've got to learn because we've been, they taught us so well with ArcMap. It's shift add, shift remove. So it's a different key combination inside of Pro. But that brings up another little trick that's built into the interface that we often want to make sure that we know what's going on here. At the very bottom of the drawing extent is a little button here that says you now have 7 things selected. And the reason why this is important is, for example, let's clear my selection. If I go and select a line and just draw a line and I'm zoomed in here, right, so that all I see is that line, I have no indication that I also have polygons selected, or if I have other layers turned on, that I've got something else selected. However, this gives me an indication I have 3 things selected in here, and I need to be aware of it. This is also, if I click on this button here, it's zoom to my selected features. So I can see real quickly what's the extent of what I have selected. So I can quickly go and figure out where this all is. I also, right next to it, is clear my selection. So just that combination of beginning to get into the habit of looking down there and seeing, if I select something, how many things do I have selected? And maybe zooming to them to see what do I have selected will help you to interact. And this is whether it's in the fabric or whether it's not in the fabric, it will help you to learn to be more efficient in what you're doing here and how you're working with it. Again, often what will happen is people will have other things turned on, and they'll get in and they'll zoom and they'll recognize, oh, I have a parcel, yes, but I also have something else here. I have that other bigger area that is selected. If you want to see exactly what you have selected, you can always go to the attributes pane to see what's in here. And I can then go and say, well, clear this one. I only want that one there. Then I can zoom in again on that. It's kind of learning the widgets that are in here and becoming more proficient at it. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey, on those. Andrew, we haven't heard from you. Can you give us a couple things that you picked up during this training?
I'm so green to this that I'm just trying to absorb it all. Everything you're throwing at me is great information that I need to know.
Yeah.
The one thing that stood out to me coming from like a title background where I'm examining deeds was the record keeping and the parcel lineage. Because when people reach out and they're like, hey, what's the parent lot to this? So I can find the deed history for that, because we oftentimes lose records depending on how many times the parcel's been divided or created from a bigger parcel. I think that that's a very powerful tool as far as record keeping and finding these old records.
I agree. So let me go. I mean, this is a intro course, by the way. So we didn't go over a lot of things on here, but let me go and show you some of the more advanced components on here. And that I can go in here and select a parcel. All right. And I can just say the current parcel in here. Only select this. Select that parcel, and on there, I can actually create this parcel lineage. All right. Now, again, let's turn off this historic. So maybe I don't even know that there's some lineage here. And inside of ArcGIS Pro 3.2 with the parcel fabric, I can create this lineage, and it will show me all the lineage in here, and I can create it, and it is a chart, a lineage chart. In this case, it shows me where I'm at, where the overall parent is, and these records and where it comes from, and all of this is just so nice to be able to go and do. And it uses basically the records and the created by and retired by records to determine. And this is, this is one reason why you want to start naming records and figuring out what's going on here. And what these are, so it starts giving you information. And think about it, I probably did go and show that to you, but it's really nice that it's built in here on here. Let's go and get rid of these. It is nice that it's built in, and it's something that I think in the future we're going to start using more and more and more on here. Thank you. Also, you made a comment yesterday about so much detail, and I get excited about what's in here inside of Pro, and the classes that you take from Panda are different in that we will give you more detail than you'll get in almost any other training session. We'll tell you little things about these tools. We'll tell you things that work, things that don't work, how they work, that sort of thing. It's not just, oh, here's a tool and what it's supposed to do. We'll give you details. When you're first learning it, it becomes overwhelming because there is so much detail. And that's the reason why we record these also, is that you have the ability to go back and reference that and say, well, what did he say about that? So there's more richness in this as you go through. And I apologize because it is overwhelming in the beginning. There's so much detail in all of this. When you just want to go and get exposed a little bit to what am I doing here and how does this thing work? So there's different levels we try to build in. But anyway.
The more detail is often better, at least in my experience.
Oh, I
As
agree.
everybody said when they were saying what they picked up from it, it's just little nuances of the tools that we didn't know about beforehand. I love learning that right off the get-go. So don't take it as a bad thing. I meant it as you're doing your job very well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's we try to go in and get you to understand as much as possible what's really going on here. Dean, do you want to go in and add anything here? Did you pick up anything in these sessions?
Yeah, I did. It was kind of funny. I'm in the midst of producing the ORMAP data tax lot polygons. And as I told you guys the last few weeks, we've gone into production. And I remembered a comment you made in class a day or so ago that was, boy, when you're exporting this data, make sure that your tax lots, you get rid of the historic data. And I remembered that, and I had produced my first set of data, and it was like, oh my gosh, I did not do that, and went in and looked at my polygons, and lo and behold, they were not correct. So that was kind of fun to pick up and see. And I think picking up on Andrew's comments, the thing I enjoy the most about the class, or one of the things I enjoy the most class, is that it's videoed. You know, my attention span is less than 4 hours, I'm sorry. I just kind of, the cup gets full and I'm done. But I can remember little details, and I'm pretty excited about how I can look at that. And I know that you've recorded the transcripts, and I'm kind of anxious to see how that works in searching for things. One of the things I liked yesterday was the error checking and not using topology, but using the quality tools. And I thought that was a nice overview, and want to go over that with my cartographers in the next few days. But I'm hoping the transcripts are going to get me to that spot rather than trying to remember. So he talked about that after this, and so I'm hopeful that that's going to work pretty well. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, let's I mean, just sort of to show you how I think you should be using transcripts. So within the recordings, and this is the recordings for this group here, within the recordings, each session has two different components to it. It has the actual video recording, and if you actually look at them, thanks, let's go ahead and do this, what the heck. If you actually look at them, in this case, we have not turned on closed captioning. There is closed captioning in here. All right. I can pull up on my side. There's actually, and I don't know how to do this in here, but there's actually a subtitle track going on all the time. And if you pull this up and turn on closed captioning, you'll actually go and see it. I don't know how to do that inside of the media center. This is not my, anyway, you can see that. And then that's the one way to do it. And then, so inside of here, we try to make that as rich as possible. The PDFs, if you actually go and open up the PDF, you can actually go and do a search in the PDF and find, I remember Frank said something about the merge tool, right? There's the merge tool. There's the timestamp that I did it on. Just go to that timestamp, pull up the video, and scroll over to that, and there's the timestamp. There's how you can actually see and use these two together for it. That's the reason why we do the transcript also, so that you can do a search on it and say, did Frank actually say something about this, and where was it? you know, that sort of thing. Or where did he say anything about the Traverse tool? Yeah, here's where he talked about it, and here's the actual timestamp that you look on in the actual movie. So try to make it as convenient as possible within the limitations of the video that we can produce. But there it is. Again,
I'm pretty excited about that search.
good.
I spend inordinate amounts of time looking at Esri videos and other class videos going, where did they say that? And it's, oh my goodness. So I'm pretty excited about learning that.
Oh, well, let's do a little bit of get off on a little bit of tangent. I actually use a tool that has artificial intelligence that's actually interpreting my audio from that and actually creating those transcripts for me. So it's an AI enabled tool to create that transcript, and it is scarily accurate. You know, if I enunciate correctly, it's amazing how well it does. And it's a free tool that uses AI, and it's scary. But I got the idea from a client who was actually handwriting, you know, oh, this is where Frank mentioned this, and this is where Frank mentioned this, and they would use that and then distribute it amongst themselves. I'm like, why can't we do that and just make that available? And that's, I think you're going to find more and more media going into that and trying to have different ways to find things on there. Just to point out, and I'm going to do a quick share up here, training recording here, to show you quickly. Here's what the movie looks like with the closed captioning turned on. All right. So this was the other reason we did this, is so that you could actually go and have that video scrolling and working on your desk without it disturbing everybody else in the office. You can go through and watch this without having to have the sound on. My voice is a little obnoxious after a while, so I understand. But yeah, this is actually, we embed the actual transcript in there again, so you can actually go and watch the whole thing. Unfortunately, we still haven't found a way to go and search that closed captioning. That's the reason why we still go and give you the transcript. But there it is. All right. So I think we're basically through here. What do we got to go and look at? What is our, this, go back to our ORMAP. Training. Dean, you want to go over your stuff?
Sure.
Or, okay, I will let Dean take over. All right, you want to share your screen out?
Yep.
And I'll sit back and listen.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. Are you seeing a screen that says parcel fabric class notes?
Yes.
Perfect. I've not taught as much as Frank has. And so I'm, if I start getting excited and talk too fast, raise your hand. And I always rely on Frank to slow me down and explain things, because I tend to start in the middle. So I'm going to try to keep on track, and I'm going to follow these class notes and just give you some ideas of some things that are going on. So the tools committee originally had their, and I also type badly, so that's really not in inputs, it's really inputs. The tools committee, when we started this a few years ago, we looked at the add-in that we had, and the add-in was something you plugged into the session, And what we found is a lot of folks weren't using the add-in pieces. And if you didn't use part of it, it just got confusing. And it didn't really fit with where Arc Pro was going. And in that particular time, everyone was talking about low code. Low code means that you can do things with less programming capability. And so rather than writing an add-in and doing all the programmer type gunk, a lot of the things that we could do with the tools in ORMAP, you can now do without that canned tool. And what we elected to do was to support you with tools using rules, attribute rules, which are stored in the database, important consideration, tasks, which are stored in the project, tools that are stored in a toolbox and a script directory. And then our last piece was when we couldn't accomplish what we needed to do for you all was we actually developed add-ins. So rules, tasks, and tools you have access to. And we then had a whole list of things that we were going to support you with that. That means one of two things. Either you're, as the cartographer, may want to learn more about some of these things, like tasks. And tasks is a great one for you to play with and gets you a little bit into arcade, which Frank's going to look at a little more in a bit. But it means that you're not necessarily just a cartographer, unless you elect to do that. And so all of the support that my cartographers get for supporting Parcel Fabric or ArcPro ORMAP editing, we provide them. So you're now, you can either do some things, you can use your GIS staff to do some things, but it isn't the canned approach we used to have, which is an important consideration. So to help you kind of look at this, there's 3 or 4 links to look at. One is that they go look at the ESRI Parcel Fabric community. That's that link that I sent you. Get an Parcel community login, sign in for that. You can post questions. It is the primary way I get user support as a user of ArcPro. I had an issue just a couple days ago where I was trying to use a domain from within a rule, and I didn't know how to do it. And I looked at the documentation, the examples that Esri gave me. As you noticed, some of the documentation, some of the interfaces from Esri isn't as intuitive as I would like it. But I went to the community page, I posted it within a day. I had an answer that said, hey, I found the answer over here, and lo and behold, it worked. So please, the community page works for not just programming, but anything you're doing with Parcel Fabric, and ESRI is, the Parcel Fabric team is very plugged into that. The second one is GitHub. GitHub is where we publish all our stuff. And so I'm gonna take a risk here and so if you want to know about all the ORMAP tools, this is our official publishing location. It's got downloads, got links to the videos, but that's where you're going to find all the introductory information about the tools. The second thing is that what we do within the tools committee is that I publish new releases on the Polk County Google Drive, which anybody who gets a link to that, which is this link, then has access to it. So that's all the work in progress before it's been through the whole review process. So anything new is going to be posted there. And in that particular case, what you're seeing is, well, let's see if I can do it right this time, though. You have access to this. So the current is 3.1. ORMAP 3.2 is where I'm working on the next round of things. So if you're not finding something, you can always look there and take a look at that. Then the last thing is that we do have an ORMAP YouTube channel. Yay. So you can get there from the GitHub site, but that's that link. And what you're going to see within that YouTube channel is for ORMAP tools is like, for example, the Osaka, Jason Camarada did such a great presentation at this winter's cartographers conference. If you didn't make it, that video is there. We also have the parcel fabric training from last year. I slowly get all of Frank's stuff and bring it over. So some of the parcel fabric classes in the past. And then the tools introductions are there. So if you want to get the basic tool introduction, there's a playlist about that. And that just works through all the tools. So if you want to know how the tools work, take a look at that YouTube channel. Questions about where the links are? Everybody's good? So I didn't see any.
You're gonna send
Yep.
us that document, Dean? Sorry, I didn't see that.
Those should be in the email I sent you this morning.
Okay.
So that email I sent you this morning should have all those links in it. And everyone got it but Jeff, because I don't know why, Jeff, you can't get things that have attachments when I send them to you. Who knows? I asked Gabe to send it to you. So yes, that should be in that email I sent you. In addition, and I'll send this doc out as well as a follow-up after class. So you also have in that email some support documents. One of them that you don't have in there is the README for the release. That is located, and I'll go through that, where that is located in a little bit. But we do have an overview of the tools. We have an overview of how you create ANO from labels and a tool on doing map production. And then finally, the add-ins, which are the arrow tool and the canceled number tool. So if you download the 7.4 data, which you should have done for the class so you can follow along with Frank, what you see there is you should have 7.4. And in there, you should have a fabric directory and a GeoDB directory. The GeoDB directory is a small data set from Polk County that then has been converted into Fabric. So all things related to Fabric are in the Fabric directory. All things related to ORMAP are in the GeoDB. And I don't know why I called it GeoDB, but it is. And then if you want to see the latest release notes, they are typically there. And I just walk through what's happened in the latest release. So it's got a quick overview of what's there, how to install, and then the latest updates that we've been making. So this was the 3.1. Here's what we did in the 3.0. Here's what we did in the 2.03, 2.02, 2.01, going back for a while. So documentation, always a nice thing. If you go into the Fabric directory and you just want to play around with things, as Frank has been showing you with the Polk data, you just go to the Fabric directory and click on the project file. And that should open up the project file. And what you're going to see is that township's worth of data. The nice thing about townships worth of data, it's got 1 to 400, 1 to 200, and 1 to 100 maps on it. And that's what you will use to test and look at tools. You also have a directory called Fabric Conversion. So for those folks that have not done a Fabric Conversion, these are not ORMAP tools. They're just samples that work with the data. So for example, I've been working with Josephine, with Gabe and Jeff for a while now on helping them convert. This is what I start with. I did a little demo for Wendy over in Tillamook a few weeks ago. Again, this contains all this stuff related to what you could do with a conversion. Going down my list, maps is a directory that has maps that were produced with the map production tool. One of the things I learned a little bit ago from Vila down in Douglas County is that even though ESRI with a map series typically doesn't let you make a TIFF, she figured out how to do it within a map series process. So now the map production tool can either make TIFFs or PDFs or both, which is pretty fun. because some organizations have a requirement for tips. Going back to my class notes, then the ORMAP tools directory has the Python scripts that are supporting the tools. And then the database that we're using for ArcPro is called Town Ed. So all of the tools, all of the rules are going to run from that directory. Okay. So I'm going to jump in and we're going to look at first the document that I talked about. And that I think is the tools. So when we started out, we said that the tools, we wanted all the tools that existed in ArcMap to exist in ArcPro. And we also identified a tool that I'm working on right now, which is Export to Goal Tool, which we never had in ArcMap. But we had some tools from John Pritchin. We had some other tools from Polk County. We had the arrow tool that people liked. We had the canceled number tool. So if you want to see all the comparison of how did I used to do this, how do I do it now? And in fact, the edit map index to update underlying is also being worked on now. And so in the next release, they'll also be there. So if you take a look at this document, which you should have, there's a process that we used to have a toggle auto update that is now being handled in annotation rules. So we're going to go look at rules real quickly. There we go. If you right click on a layer, you can go to data design and you're going to see a few things. One of those is the domains. The domains are what we used to have in ArcMap. And if you get the demo data and say, well, my data doesn't have this or more, one of the things you should do is look at the domains and make sure that all of your domain values for all of these are correct for you. For example, water type, I know that some of the counties that are on the Columbia or on the coast have more water types. So that's where you would edit and add them. This is a database function, and that's going to happen before you move your data into an enterprise environment. Likewise, now we have something called an attribute rule. And an attribute rule is not a guideline. It's a rule. And if you own the database, you can turn the rule off or on. But if you don't own the database, it's going to implement every time. And that can be a little frustrating because if you add the rule, it's always on. And if you're in an enterprise environment, you've got to talk to your enterprise manager, administrator to make that happen. But attribute rules can be really cool because they can be very simply created and edited. So in this particular case, I have a rule. It's a calculation rule. And I'm telling it that every time I insert a piece of annotation for Anno 400, it's going to automatically implement this simple little code. And I don't know, guys, folks, that how you're interested in doing arcade. Frank will talk a little bit about this in a minute or in a bit. But basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, set the map index, grab the map index map number from the map, intersect that with my current feature. So my current feature is the piece of annotation I'm grabbing, and I'm going to grab the map number. And you remember, annotation, we just want to know what map it's associated with. It's going to return the map number. And if it doesn't find a map, it's going to say, hey, you got a problem. But all this little code is doing nothing more than anytime I add a piece of annotation, it's going to calc that. In addition to that, then there are some other feature classes like cartographic lines. And cartographic lines are going to, in this particular case, not just return the map number, they are also going to return the map scale. Remember, we wanted that tool. So anytime you add a piece of cartographic line, it's going to grab the map scale and the map number. And again, this is happening just on insert. So remember, we have the toggle that said, oh, do you want to do that or not? Yes, we do that. But instead of our toggle, we said only do this when you insert a feature, because if I move a feature and I want to, like a C map, to see it in the map that's next to it, it's going to not do this tool. It only happens when I add it. Where that gets a little more complicated is in tax lots. Because in tax lots, I want to get the map information. And the map information I want to grab is the map number, because when I add a tax lot, the centroid that the map is in, or the centroid of the tax lot the map is in, I'm going to grab the map number, the ORMAP num, and the county. And I'm going to bring it across. Once I have that, I got a second rule. And my second rule is calc, and here's an interesting error. Apparently in Arcade, you can have two pluses as long as they're not right next to each other. And in this particular case, I'm going to make the OR tax slot to be equal to the ORMAP number. And if the tax slot has only 3 characters, I need to input leading zeros. And again, I don't have to think about how the ORMAP tax slot is calculated. It does it for me. Once I've got that, and this gets into your county-specific data, which is how do you build your unique map tax lot so you can connect to your A&T systems. So that rule does that. And the last rule is that what we found is that all those links of a tax lot to a record displays the actual GUI ID of the record that the feature belongs to. But in this particular case, I wanted to grab also the name so that when I look at a feature, I know what names it is. So I'm not sure about you, but I don't view that as low code. That's programming. However, it's not super complicated. There's not a lot of code relative to what we used to do, but your county now owns that. Questions on attribute rules. They should all be in place when you set your system up, and you should no longer have to worry about any of those things. All those updates should happen for you automatically. Questions? No questions at all.
So
Cool.
when I go over here shortly of attributes and attribute rules, I will not go into the complex level that you put in here, but I will go and at least be able to explain and illustrate how they're composed and what they are. We're not going to go into intersect sets or anything like that, but just sort of give the basis of Arcade and attribute rules and how they work.
And that's perfect.
Yeah.
In this particular case, what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to, well, I'll go through and demo all this in just a minute. In addition to that, you have tasks. If you're in the tasks, we'll go through tasks in a few minutes. Those are things that are associated with the project that you can play with. We also then over here have a number of tools. So one of the tools we have is that I can zoom to a map. So if I want to open this, and let's say I wanted to zoom to 7410, I can zoom to 7410. And if I wanted to zoom within 7410, I can zoom to 602 and 7410. So that is a tool that is using a toolbox and a Python script. You don't have to mess with that at all. In addition to that, you also have the ability as one of the tools is to update your map number. And in this particular case, it's telling me I've got 52 maps selected. So I'm just going to select one map. Once I get my selection set up right. And in this particular case, this map is 7410, and all of the things associated with that map, township range, section, suffix, if you've got a suffix type, if you have things associated with the map page, titles, groups, and so forth, you can do it there. One thing to note here is that map angle is now managed within the map index layer, as is the title. So things to look at there when you're looking at that. So that's another tool that you have. And one of the things about this particular tool is that you'll notice that county is there. And when I go to township and range, these are the township and ranges in Polk County. It's pretty easy to change those within the parameters. Again, that's something that can be done locally with your GIS folks. Another tool that's there is update tax lot area. So remember we talked about we have OR tax lot and OR the map tax lot feet and map acres and tax lot acres. This tool will take the calculated acres that Frank was talking about yesterday and update those as required by ORMAP. So those are some of the tools. Again, all of this is summarized in that document that is the Parcel Fabric tools. And it talks about where you can do to customize it. It talks about where the zoom tool is and how to use it. It goes through and how to assign tax lots, the update map index tool, combining tax lots. We used to have a combine tool. We're now using a combine tool. We're now using merge, which is an Esri tool. We have an arrow tool and a cancel number tool, which are add-ins. And then we have our new map production tool that we just developed within the last 3 to 6 months. And I am working on goal 2, and I'll show you that in just a couple minutes. So look at this document. If you've got questions on those tools, all of these tools have videos associated with them. And so rather than me blasting through them all in detail, I wanted to give you that overview first. So you have attribute rules, which are associated with the database. You have tasks, which I'm going to show you next, which are associated with the specific project. You have the tools that are associated with scripts, and then you have a couple add-ins. And I'm going to go do some stuff, and you can watch me flounder. I'm going to go to map. And so I'm going to jump in and first do that attribute rule. So
before you do that, Dean, I can back up a little bit.
Yep.
When you were talking about attribute rules for annotation, and you have a rule that says when you insert the annotation, it's going to grab the map index and stuff that goes with it. And you have the update not checked, so which is good. But does that allow you then, if you decide you've got a piece of text that's assigned to the wrong map index, can you edit that?
Yes.
And change it?
Yes, good question. Yeah. And let's do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add data. I'm going to go to my edit, click on edit. I'm going to say create, and let's add a piece of text. And so in this particular case, I'm going to add a tax lot. Well, I'll just add river because it's big. And so it's grabbing the correct symbology and all that sort of stuff. And if I go to attributes, There's the map number. Now, what's cool about that is, oh, I did it wrong. Well, I can update that. And because I didn't have the update clicked on, it stays the same. What can be scary is there's some attribute rules that you have update clicked on, and you'll come over here and you'll try to update the attributes and it just flips it back. You know, what the heck is going on? So good things to remember. Good question.
But the
So
first version of that I had was doing that, and it was driving me crazy. So
yeah, because edit was turned on.
Yeah.
And again, all of these tools, because what we saw, there were so many, when we got into working with this between the 5 counties, all of us did things so many different ways. That's where we left the add-in environment and said, look, you've got the tools, you can customize it at your county to exactly fit what you're doing. The bad news is you've got to customize it to work at your county. So it adds a different level of workload to make it, to set it up. Once it's set, you're set to go. Here's a task combined with that. And tasks then are a more user-friendly way to add, how do I want to say tasks? So if you have things that you need to do a lot, so you need to combine a number of steps together so that you don't have to repeat them, reset the edit environment, reset how you see things, and remember which step happens in what order. You can string ArcPro commands together pretty simply, and there's whole classes and videos on how to mess with tasks, and that's beyond what we're doing here. Again, I'm just showing you what tasks we do have and how they work. And in this particular case, I've got an annotation layer, which is for my tax lot anno, and I have a task. And what I'm going to do is when I click on that task, it is going to put together a number of steps. And one of the steps is that it is going to, sorry, let's jump back a step. I can change tasks by going to an edit designer. And when I'm in that task, this task is made up of 3 steps, sorry. The first one is to add annotation. And in this particular case, how I see that and what I see is I can have different layers turned on. And if you look at your contents, select or draw, tells you if you've got something selectable or not, editable, snapping layers. All of those layers are listed here. But one of the things that you can do with that, and this was a design consideration, and I'm going to flip it back at 3.2 because it's annoying, is that I left things the way they were, which means that if it's a dash, if you were in edit environment, it left it. If you didn't have it displayed, it wouldn't display it. And you can control what you see or how it operates. And here I'm checking all these boxes to not see these. So this is going to override whatever you have in the edit session. And I don't want to, in this particular task, let them edit the other annotation classes. I just want to edit that. So the idea is that you have these tools that let you go through those tasks. Here's the next one. And you can see I'm going to set how you see stuff to the previous. And then at the end, I'm going to set my layers however I want them to be. I could set them back. So I could set my layers in a task to be something to help me do the task and set it back when I was finished to whatever, for example, my default edit mode was. So the first task is edit tax lot. And what I can look at is under actions, I'm just using the create command. That's the same command that under the edit bar is create. So in fact, I added that command by using something called record, and I grabbed that command and brought it down. The next step, I'm just using the calculate field command. That's the same command if I was going to do calculate. And the last one is it's actually doing nothing, but it was going to set my layers. So let's say, for example, I wanted my layers visible different than what it is in this specific task. And if I go to calculate, I'm saying, hey, look, only have this work on the features that I added. And again, there's lots of great demos on how to play with tasks. So in this particular case, I'm going to add tax lot anno again. And what you can see is I had it set. So it set in this particular task, it said, oh, you're going to edit tax lot anno and you want the 1 to 400 annotation to come across. And when I place it, I can place this text. And the next thing is it's going to use calculate by looking at the underlying map index, and it grabs the underlying tax lot. It grabs the tax lot number and just assigns it. Likewise, when I add bearing, it's going to show me all the COGO lines. And in this particular case, I want to add bearing and distance. And I'm working with Jeff and Gabe so that we can use the follow tool within this as well, and use the set offsets. So another piece that we're adding to that tool that will be out at 3.2. So when this is done, I've added 2 pieces of text. It's going to go in and find the underlying or the nearest tax lot line, and it's going to reformat the bearing to be correct, and it's set to go. Now, in that particular case, what you'll see with that is that when I open the attribute table, or let's just do attributes, I guess. There's my bearing and distance. So I've taken a task that's made something simpler, but it's still running on top of my rule. So it's applying my rule that sets the it across. So again, just a real quick, I mean, I could spend all day talking about these tools. We've spent a long time making them. There's lots of videos. There's good documentation. I'm just kind of showing you how they fit together. Another
Dean, one
tasks.
question, Dean, sorry
Yes,
to
thank
interrupt.
you.
One question before. Are you using Python for your calculations to calculate and pull out the actual COGO values from the lines, or are you using Arcade?
Using Arcade because I stole the code from Esri.
Yeah. Be careful if you try to use this inside of a parcel fabric, only because Arcade has no way of knowing whether or not you've got an active record, whether or not you've got historic lines in there. So if you have lines on top of lines, it may take a different value. It may not take the
Actually,
one that you're seeing.
that's built in, so it figures that out.
Okay.
So the question is if I've got a historic tax lot sitting on top of it on my active tax lot, I got 2 lines potentially. And what annotation is it going to grab? And in this particular case, let's go look at calculate. And it's going to check the created by record. So basically, it looks at that, and so you can mess with that in grabbing that underlying feature. And there are some tweaks you have to do in an enterprise environment because then you're into versioning. So, but yeah, you can add that tool within Arcade and trap those. It's not, again, it's weird code underneath, and we figured out how to make sure that it's grabbing the current. And in fact, if you, yeah, so there's pieces to address that, things. Other questions about tasks? And tasks can be very simple. For example, one of the requests we had was to add parentheses. So when a piece of anno has historic line associated with it, I want to put parentheses around it if it's associated with another an older measurement that may not match the current measurement. Basically what I'm going to do is select a feature. And it added parentheses around it. And if I run it again, it'll take the parentheses away. Questions about tasks?
I'll just make the comment that tasks are very good if you have a set of steps that you never deviate from. If it's exactly those same steps every single time, these tasks are great. If, however, you need flexibility built into that process, they're not so easy to use, and then you might look at other options. But again, what you've done here is fantastic.
When you're doing tasks, think of them as shortcuts. I do things the same way all the time. In this particular case, I need to add tax lots. I don't want to remember what scale I'm at, or I don't want to remember a lot of things about it. I just want to add, I want to place my tax lot correctly, and I want it to calculate what it's supposed to be. I did write a task that, because when we started this, the feeling I got, the direction I felt I got from Esri was that tasks could really support workflow. And the difference was that when I think workflow, I think workflow. And when Esri was talking about workflow, they were talking about the tiny pieces of workflow. And so I actually wrote a task over a month that would allow you to do all the steps to create a subdivision, all of them. And the problem is that, you know, cartographers don't follow the rules, don't follow the steps, and there's no way. But a great task to mess with that is just a really simple one is, let's say that you want to edit, you want to just, if you're going to work on 1 to 400 anno, and you just want to see the 1 to 400 anno or make that only editable, one way to do it is that I'm going to edit in Designer, and I'm going to create a new task. And with that task, I'm going to call it edit anno 400. And I'm going to create a step. And all that step is, it's going to automatically run. It's going to be hidden. And all I'm going to do is set that I want to edit. And oh, Bob told me how to click all of these at once, but I can never remember how to do it. So all this is doing is, no matter what I have turned on or edited, I'm going to make it so I can only edit that. And I'm not going to go through anymore because you can watch me grab buttons forever. That's my new task. And that step is turn it on. And now I'm going to run that task. And so what you'll see here is that let's turn on a bunch of things to edit under my anno. And I'm going to go to tasks and say, turn it on. It ran, but when I go back to my contents, I've got it set wrong. Bummer. That's what it's supposed to do. Sorry, demos are not always working the way that you want them to do. But you can see all I'm messing around with there is those particular pieces. And I turn them off. I didn't turn them on edit. I get excited and I hit the wrong buttons. So in this particular case, I'm going to turn off my other scales, and I'm going to turn off their editability. And I'm going to hope that this works. It's been a while since I've messed with tasks, and it ran it. And when I go back to contents, the edits are turned off, as well as the drawings are turned off. So even if I had all these turned on, so that's one of the funnest things I've seen about tasks, is that I can set up those edit environments. They run very quickly. And now it's set it how I wanted things to set. It could set my snap tolerances, my drawings, all of that. So that's a very quick way to learn how to use tasks. Questions on tasks? I'm going to go back. Add-ins. So the arrow tool is an add-in. The arrow tool, then you have to download and install. And once you've installed it, it is now available in every ArcPro session on that machine. And so I know that I have it turned on, and I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to turn cartographic lines on in my edit. And in that particular case, I want to create. And if I add my tax lot arrow, sorry, clicking on, obviously my arrows are not in annotations unless I'm using leader lines. But in this particular case, when I click on this, what you see here, it says single arrow. It says dimension arrows, it says hooks, and so forth. So there's good documentation on this, but I can add a single arrow. So these little icons are actually coming from the add-in. So that's a great way. You just click on any line feature and it's there. And now I'm going to add in my line. And once I've got my add-in, I can change the endpoint. I can zigzag an arrow style. And in this particular case, it's not finished. Do you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue. So now I've added a zigzag line. And when I mess with the zigzag line, I can widen it, I can narrow it, and there's little shortcuts for that. I can change its endpoint. So basically that lets me add an arrow. The way the ticks work, in that I'm going to add those as being varying distance hooks. I'm going to add in my ticks. I can point at any, depending on your snapping, see how I have my arrows set. I can then change it to operate at different scales. I can make them shorter. I can make them taller. I can switch the side and so forth. And basically what you're seeing here is I'm just clicking on one side or the other to, and the distance from the line is where the hook goes. And that's an add-in that you can, and once I click it, I can save it, I can cancel it, and so forth. So those are the add-ins. You have hooks, and again, there's some videos on this, but those are the add-ins. There's also another add-in for messing around with cancel numbers. Okay. Questions? So that's all the tools that we have on the edit environment. Once that's done, one of the things that we can do is that we can produce maps. And this is a good example of where requests from cartographers came in and said, well, wait a minute, we need to do something a little different. So when we looked at this, we came up with that, we said, well, wow, all the things that we need to do are built into the layouts. So in this particular case, if I open a layout, this is called a map series layout. And in that map series layout, it lets me map all my features. Because it's a map series, I can go through and have it generate the maps on the fly as I'm watching. It's got links to the canceled number and so forth. It's got a little locator page and saying, well, it's all done in the layout, everything's done. And then I presented this at Osaka a year or so ago, and Wendy and Scott said, from Tillamook and Scott said, well, wait a minute, that we have exceptions when we're doing the 18 by 20 layout. And the 18 by 20 layout still has an issue in that if this map doesn't quite fit, you may want to move elements around on that particular map. And our tool didn't allow that. We didn't have that ability to manage that. So one of the things that we added in is we now have a page layout elements table, very similar to the old layouts, but it's linked to that layout. And this is where we can have all of our exceptions to how things look. And there's a record here called template, which is the actual values of that, of what they are, where they are placed on the 18 by 20 map. So in this particular case, then I'm going to go and do the map production tool. And I can grab multiple maps. I can grab all the maps. Instead of grabbing my maps from a list, I can produce maps for all of the maps in a township. All the maps in a township range and section. Obviously, I want to grab my layout. And I want to, one of the things that I can do is if I want to use the page elements, that file, and what you'll see here when I open it, in this particular case, it says, oh, well, I have exceptions to the layout, and for maps 7413, 744, and 745. So if I said yes, it would go in and look for those changes and change the elements. How it's doing that is that I take that layout, map production 18 by 20, and I make a copy of it. And in this particular case, I'm going to save the copy of it. I'm putting my output to maps. I'm going to say run. And being I haven't run this on this version, we'll cross our fingers. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down and look at the maps directory. And 221, 928, it made them. What you can see, and this is so cool from Viola from Douglas County. She's figured out then, because she had a requirement that she needed to make the maps as a TIFF, and she also needed to make the maps as a PDF. And this does both. So that was pretty cool from her. But what's pretty fun about it is that you'll notice here is now there's two new layouts. There's a layout for the 7411. There's a layout for the 11412. And you can go in and then when I open this up, and let's say, well, you know, when I'm looking at that particular layout for 7412, I don't like where the title is. Assuming you grab the right stuff. And that layout can now be saved and changed, or I can go into my exceptions table, add the record in for, let's try to do that. That was 7411 or 7412. So I'm going to copy. And let's open up the map elements table. And I have to have my layout to be active. I've got 7412 open. And I say update map elements. Again, hopefully it's going to work in this version because I've been playing. Yeah, I don't know what I've got set wrong, but what you can see here is these are all the map element positions of where it's grabbing these from. And I can go in and edit those and move them around and rerun this, and it will then update that table. And again, the documentation is there about how that works. The version I've got, I was messing with. But that's the production tool that's available on the 3.1. Questions on map production? This week's tool that I've been playing around with was a request that we had from the state, in that we had to run and remake the delivery for the Department of Revenue. And one of the things that we ran into with the delivery Department of Revenue is that we need to make sure that all of our data is delivered consistently. And those of you that were at Osaka, Rachel from DAS was talking about that they want to take all of our data and really move it into and make it accessible for more folks. And in order to make that happen, we need to make our attributes more consistent. And in the past, Department of Revenue historically over the last several years has checked whether you got all the fields or not, but not whether our data was correct or not. And I made a proposal to the tools committee that this is a tool we've only been talking about for 15 years and we've just never done. And in this particular case, what we want to be able to do is generate the state required shapefiles and the prop table. And so what I did is I made a new little project area, and I am pointing at, and then I used Wasco data, because at the same time, Bryce over at Wasco, working with Ivan and Tycho, had called and said, you know what, our data's not working right. We're getting rejected by Tom at GOR. We're not sure why. We're using Pro. Can you help us out? So I plugged their data into this new tool, and then I'm using it to take a look at it. And in this particular case, what I have is I am pointing at the source data. So source feature classes are tax lot, tax code, and a map index. And this is where I got into the issue with Frank, is that this better have in it the definition query that says required by record is null, because I certainly don't want the old data to be there. And I did that, but I forgot that I actually still had to change it in my script. So basically, I'm pointing at the tax lot layer, the tax code layer, the map index layers in Wasco's data set. And they're a standard geodatabase, so all that looked pretty good. So in this particular case, and what you'll notice, and I don't know, Gabe, did you produce the data from ArcPro for revenue? For the data exchange? Not to put you on the spot. You there, Gabe?
Sorry, say that again, Dean?
Did you produce the DOR shapefiles from ArcPro, or did you do it from ArcMap?
Sorry, from Pro.
Okay, so one of the things that you noticed is that our data, we elected not to include township range and section and quarter. We just said that the map number, the ORMAP number, has all that built into it. So why include that additional code? But in the data that is needed by revenue for the data exchange standard, we still have township, town part, town direction, and so forth. And so what I did is I wrote a little tool that says, take our data, and in this particular case, Wasco is 33. And as you all know, I suck at numbers. So I'm going to run this little tool, and it's going to walk through the entire Wasco data set, and it's going to produce a preliminary geodatabase shapefiles. And it's going to update that information. And what's kind of fun about that is it's doing the things, Gabe, that you were doing. Now, for most of it, it's pretty simple. You just append from your R data set into the feature classes that are required by the state. You're set to go. And what it's doing right now is it's done map index, it's done tax code, it's done tax lot, and now it's going to go through and update the tax lot attributes. And it's made it, and I'm set to go. However, the thing that we were running into with Wasco is, even though they were doing it, the data didn't look right. And so what I wrote is a review and got Tom's stuff from DOR that he runs, but I also added some more, and I'm going to run that. And it's just printing out all the potential errors that I may have. And it also makes that as a report. So in this particular case, it's doing the map index pre-check, and it's saying, oh, all your counties are good. All your map scales are good. But there are 671 polygons that do not have a map rel code assigned. There are 522 that do not have a map class. But they're also saying that the ORMAP number is all in the correct length and they're all filled in. Tax code, the only thing I check is that the county number is correct. And then in the tax lot, I check and make sure that it's got all of the tax lot, township, range, section, quarter correct. I then check to see if special interests are supposed to be, if there's a special interest account, it should be yes or no. So there are 60 tax lots that don't have a special interest. There are 16,000 tax lots, virtually everyone in the county that doesn't have that. And there are 52 that are missing a map class, and so forth and so forth. Okay. So how can I use that? Well, I then said, what I want to do is I want to use validation to make it happen. So the first thing I did is I made validation rules. Remember those attribute rules that we talked about? And one of the reasons I wanted to show you, it's just a quick way to go back through and look. But my attribute rules are tied to domains. So I created domains for everything. So here's a domain. Here's all the valid counties, 1 through 36. Map class. Here's all the valid map classes. Map rel code, map scale, even the 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 30, 1 to 40, and so forth. Section numbers. Section numbers, it's a range, 0 to 37. 37 are so those weird east side counties have some 37 sections. This then contains all the domains I'm interested in. I then said, well, that's cool. Let's create validation rules. Validation rules are pretty cool rules that I've just learned about. The nice thing about validation rules is validation rules only kick in when you do an error inspection. So they're not constraining you. So remember, Gabe and Jeff, when you guys, Josephine County does not have an outline for the map index. The map index does not only includes the tax lots. So roads are not there. However, when they were adding annotation inside of road, like the road name, my attribute rule was blowing up because it said, you don't have a map number, because we said a map number was true. So we had to go in and mess around with the map number and make sure that we return that, because a rule's a rule. However, validation rules are rules that only kick in when you're reviewing the map. So in this particular case, if I then go in for tax lots, I'm going to go into the edit screen, turn on my edits, and I'm going to turn on the error inspector. And I'm going to evaluate the rules. This is going to take a minute, but this is going through all of the tax lots, all of the map index, and it's finding every polygon. So remember, some of those were 16,000 of them. It's finding all of them that don't fit the rules. But I can disable attribute rules that I don't like. So let's say I say, well, I don't care if MapRel code isn't there. We don't use it. The state tells me I got to fill it in. I'll fill it in. Well, I can disable that attribute rule for validation. So this is applying those attribute rules at the time I'm doing validation. And in my little tool report, I'm also going through and checking those domains and so forth. So while this is running, you have to answer me because we're just sitting here waiting. So actually this was planned. Is this at all useful to you guys? You know, we're going to use it. Wasco's going to use it, but is this tool worth using? And that's the question I have. Gabe, I know you just did this. Scott, I don't know where you were at. Andrew, other folks. Is this a tool that you would actually use?
Pretty sure we will.
Okay.
And we're not actually in production yet in Pro, so I don't know, but it sounds like it would be useful.
The idea, what I did was, and it's taken a little longer than I planned. Any other counties? Yes, no, it's okay. You don't offend me if you say no. That's why we built the rules so that you can say no.
I think we probably would in Jefferson, but we are not in Pro yet, so we will see. But I could see it being useful.
Okay.
Oh,
Others?
I like this concept.
So one of the things I ran into that was really annoying is that you can't use the error inspector unless you have the global GUI ID turned on and you're tracking edits. And that ORMAP DOR data structure doesn't include those. So what I did is I made preliminary data to look at it. And in this particular case, I can turn on the error layers associated with those, and I can go find them. And what you'll see in this list is there's a ton of them, because what did we say? We said map index better have a rel code. Well, there's a million of them that don't have rel code. So what I'm going to do now, so I'm going to turn the inspector off, and let's go to the attribute rules associated with this tax lot feature, or the map index feature class. And one of the reasons it's so nice that it's in a geodatabase is I have the ability to turn these off or on. I'm going to disable. So this is what you can do with attribute rules. I'm going to disable map rel code and map class because I don't care. I'm going to leave the other ones on. And it's telling me I'm in edit mode. One of the things that happens is when you turn the inspector on, it turns the edit mode on, which is annoying. But now these things are turned off. So they're gone. I'm going to go to tax lot, go to its attribute rules, and I'm going to turn rel check off. I'm going to turn map class off. We don't do special. I'm just going to do those. Are there any others I would like? Range check, set number check, range check, special check. So they're gone.
So Dean, one of the things you might want to look at is regarding editor tracking being turned on. It's only 3.2 that actually started checking for error tracking on some of these. You might, if you can, go back to 3.1.5 or whatever and see if it still requires error tracking. That was one of the things that we found at 3.2. Suddenly there were tests that were being run to determine whether or not error tracking was turned on or not. And it was giving all sorts of weird errors. So 3.1, yeah, so go and check and see. You might be able to do it without creating older or preliminary copies of the data.
But in this particular case, then, it's telling me that I've got some maps that have an incorrect width for the ORMAP number. But remember all of those errors that we were getting there for rel code, they're not here anymore. Trust me, even though I'm scrolling by it so fast, nobody can see it. But those rules are no longer in place, so the error inspector is not finding them. So the review DOR pre-check is doing nothing more than appending that data into from my source data, whether it's in a geodatabase, whether it's in an SDE database, and it's bringing them local so I can play and start looking for errors. Once that's done, I can now create the shapefiles. And all it's doing is I grab and make templates and put them in. And in this particular case, one of the things that the state wants is they don't want just shapefiles, they want a geodatabase. And what this is doing is creating those in a geodatabase. And what you'll see down here at the lower right, I was playing, so I probably screwed it up somehow. Oh, yeah, I'm doing some error tracking. But if I go to the I have the data exchange files. Here's my shape files. And what you'll see is this got made on 947. So these are the shape files that Esri requires for tax lots and so forth. In addition to that, it makes a zip file of the DOR. No, it didn't do that, but I can. In this geodatabase are these three feature classes. And I'm in the process of working with the folks at Wasco with Tyco to kind of review what they want to review in the property table. Our Prop 33, I guess is its name. So that's an example of how we implement tools. And what I wanted to end on here is that this is our process. It's the same as map production. You all said, Scott, Wendy said, the map production tool that we built based on just the layout doesn't work. We need something better. We built that tool. In this particular case, we needed a tool that could produce this. Fortunately, Bryce at Wasco was having problems with the data and communicating that data to Tom at Department of Revenue. And it fits in because they're also a pilot study for Rachel's group that wants to take our tax lot data and make it more widely useful for state agencies. And to make it more widely useful, we need to make sure our attributes fall within better parameters. And I don't know about you all, but I never fill in map class while I'm doing maintenance. We've since added it in, so you could, if you wanted, as an attribute that again is happening. But I add those on the end, and I don't care. But if that's a state requirement, this gives us a way to communicate about that. So this is the next tool, and what it will be is that I'm added in this particular case, the Wasco data set, member contains Fabric, and it contains the geodatabase. It's got some other project files that we've been messing with, but now it's going to have a folder called DOR export files, and that DOR export files is going to have all the information on how to use that. And because I'm writing the documentation, I fully expect you to all notify me, say, this is where it's not clear. And as we implement these at other counties, it'll just get better and better. But that's an example of how a tool can get built. But more importantly, it's an example how I can use validation rules. And I think Frank's going to talk about validation rules a bit more after break and how the arcade stuff goes. But really, for me as a technical person supporting you guys, I had the same issues with moving to ArcPro Fabric that you're having with just editing. There's a lot of options. It's a lot of new stuff. I literally just learned how to do validation rules with attributes and domains as of last Friday. And I didn't know how to make it work with domains correctly, and went to the community page and said, I'm dumb, I don't get it. I see these examples from Esri, they don't make sense. And there was a nice person that within a day on the community page said, here's an example that I found that works. And he found it in a piece of the documentation that I had not seen before. I grabbed that code and was able to then expand out our validation rules. And I'm going to be meeting with Christy and Zach, our cartographers, tomorrow, and start talking to them about how we can start doing not just validation rules for making the ORMAP Department of Revenue data standard, but how we can use it for our own internal purposes, because that's pretty cool stuff. Some of the things that we're looking at is ensuring the relationship between tax lots and tax codes and the account numbers are correct. So different pieces. That was a lot of stuff. And like I say, please, I will email that document I sent to you. I'll send out the tech class notes, because that really goes through where the links are, and it describes where some of these different documents are. I've demoed these tools to you guys at Osaka, spring, summer, and winter for 2 years as we've been progressing. The videos are there. Take a look at those. And I'd be happy to answer questions on the different tools and direct you to different tools committee members that have worked on it. Any questions? You're right, Frank. This is a quiet group.
It is a very quiet group.
And
Yeah.
you know, it's a lot to take in. I'm more than happy to go over the rules and the tools that are there. And I'm not offended by, hey, this is wrong. Why are you doing this? The reason that we're writing the tools is so they work for you and make your job easier, quicker. ORMAP is funding these efforts. My time when I'm working on tools and rules is supported by ORMAP. So it's part of what I'm supposed to be doing. So appreciate your time today. I'm done.
All right. Any other comments? I have to tell you, having been involved with attribute rules and putting together some preliminary tasks and everything, this is very impressive what the what's been put together. It's pretty comprehensive, and it is overwhelming. There's so much involved in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take half-hour break. We'll come back. It's a 25 after. Cleanse your mind during this half hour. We're going to go back and talk. We've got a couple of things to go over, but we're going to sort of introduce you to Arcade, the scripting language, the one that's taken over for VB Script. Introduce that, and we're going to be a little bit slower than what we just went through. So it'll take it a little bit easier, and we'll show you how Arcade can be used for doing field expressions, calculating attribute fields, for going and doing labeling, for doing all sorts of valuation, and for attribute rules. And that'll be probably the rest of the content for us. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pause the recording now. All right, we're back from our break. That was impressive, Dean. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. As I said, often when we are talking about some of these things in here, it's very easy to get really deep very quickly. And I want to just sort of take a step back and talk about Arcade a little bit, talk about how it's used, introduce that to you, rather than directly jumping into attribute rules, and show you just sort of what it is and how it works. So just sort of to let you know, as we go and look at this, I'm going to go in here to labeling properties. And let's just first state that within ArcGIS Pro, no longer is VB Script the default for labeling, for creating labelings. Rather, the default is now arcade. And while you can continue to use VBScript, you're going to find that it's actually being used less and less within the application. Esri is abandoning it, moving into arcade, which is a completely new scripting language. Specifically for labels, you can still use JavaScript, you can use JScript, you can use Python, whatever, but overwhelmingly arcade is becoming the standard for that. Some good news if you are, as you're making this change from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro, is with ArcGIS Pro 3.2, you can now still use VBScript for field calculations. Up to this point, you could not. The only thing you'd use VBScript for was labeling. So as a concession to those users who are moving over, you can now do attribute field calculations using VBScript if you're using 3.2. I would consider that maybe you need to look at maybe learning arcade. It is a very, very rich language on here. There is, in fact, let me go and open up a new. There is a function reference for arcade in which you can look at all the documentation for arcade, learning how it's being used and such, and specifically the functions in here. This is actually, if you're kind of familiar with how you go and use expression languages and things of that sort, this is actually the place you should start at. This is actually a very well put together set of help files for you. And so if you go and look at ArcGIS Pro or developers.arcgis.com/arcade and start at the help, it gives you quite a bit about arcade, why it's useful, how it's used. I can tell you that arcade is being adopted because it is now become universal across all of Esri's products. You use it in ArcGIS Pro, you use it on ArcGIS Online, you use it in field maps, you use it in web maps, you use it all over. It's being used, and it's being used in more than just simple components on it. It's being used for, well, I have a slide for that. It's being used for labeling. You know, when you go and produce labels, it's being used for attribute field calculations, for attribute rules, for symbology, for pop-ups, for all of these things. Arcade has become the default standard for going and doing label expressions. And it is, as I said, a very rich language, including things like you could do statements, you could do loops, you can do a lot of different things in here. For example, inside of here, this right here is a good example of just a simple if statement in which, and let's walk through this. It's setting up a condition saying, okay, if the $ feature is a global variable, it's a way to reference a feature that's being analyzed. If and so you've got the $ feature, which is the global variable, and it says the dot after it says evaluate the attributes of the field called stated area. If stated area is less than 1, and then there's a notation here that says return a false. And then if it's not less than 1, return a true. Quick little simple statement in there. And so then if you want to do that, there's also a way to loop through here. And this is a real good example of how to loop through on here, how to do this. Some of the logical expressions is, for example, 2 ampersands is an and, 2 vertical lines are ors, an exclamation point is a not, and 2 equals is an equals to, and this is a not equals to. So how you can do that. Labels. We're gonna give you some examples of creating a label and show you how it works. And so a lot of the text formatting components for the labels are useful in there to understand what's going on. For example, in order to create a new line inside a label, there's a global called text formatting.newline, and it returns a new line on here. So let's go here to this and let's create a label for our tax lots. And we're going to create, we'll just do it on the full label expression here. We're going to wipe out what they've got here. We don't care about that. We're going to start here. And we're going to say for this label, first thing we want to do is we just want to put the name in here. And when we double click on the name field, note what it does. It has that global variable. The $ feature says take the name field out of this polygon and make that the label. Simple little stuff. All right. So now let's go ahead and turn on our labels. And let's make sure that our labeling, we're actually using the full labels. There it is. And let's go and say, always label this. And I'm checking because this is not my data. I'm checking to see is in fact, do we have a value here in this attribute field? And we have nothing in the name field. So let's put something in the name field. Let's just call this demo. All right. When we do this, there's demo. There is our label. Simple little stuff. But let's build on that. Yes, I want to go and commit it. Let's build on this. So within Arcade, if we wish to go and concatenate things together or add them together, we use the plus sign, not the ampersand as in VB script, but the plus sign. And then if it's a text string, we put it inside of single or double quotes, but we have to be consistent in what we're using. All right, let's go and put a dash in front of this. Excuse me, let's put a dash in front of this so we can just see it and say, go ahead and apply this. And sure enough, there it is. This is here. All right, now note, it's gone and done that on every one of these because all of these have the same expression. They're all using the same expression. So this is going to be included in every label. And this is just going to be whatever the name field is on here. So again, simple little things, concatenating things together, plus sign. If in fact we wish to go and add, for example, a numeric value, numbers are not delimited by quotes. All right, so I can go and do that, and it will go and put a number value in there. Let's go put a space there so we can just see that. Go ahead and, yeah. All right, and apply that, and we put a space there. So Arcade is somewhat forgiving in that you don't necessarily need to go and declare variables and such. It interprets how you delimit these components as far as whether or not they're text, whether or not they're numbered and such. So if I were to go in and put a plus sign after this and tell it that this is actually 54 plus 16 in here. Notice it adds them up. It's thinking these are all text strings because they're of how they appear in here. If I wanted to calculate this out, I would be careful where I put this as far as the string in here, or I might declare it as a variable. Declaring something as a variable is basically you use the VAR statement. It says this is a variable. Num is equal to, and then I'll put this in here. I'll take it out of there and I'll put it here. And then I'll say here to go first, I'm going to declare this variable, and then I'm going to say it's this plus this, and then I'm going to say for my label, put the name field, this piece of text, and then at the end of it, put the value of the number field of that num. All right. So again, it's fairly forgiving as far as how we go and handle numbers. We really don't have to type them as far as our variables or anything. We just declare them and go on from there. So simple scripting in here. Let's say I wanted to go and add a value. Let's go and check on this before we get to that point. Tax lot, okay. Let's go back here and say, all right, well, let's put the name field in there. Then let's go and add, instead of this thing here, let's go and add the value. Let's put spaces in there. And then let's add the value of the tax lot. Which one was it? Was it this one in here? Let's see what that looks like. So that's the demo. There's the tax lot number on here. And then 70s at the end of it. Just to build on this, this is just simple components on here. If I wish to go and separate this, I can separate this out and put it here to show you that, in fact, that's separating out. There's the map tax lot number. If I wish to go and begin to build on this a little bit more, I can apply arithmetic to this. If I wanted to, I could calc this to be something more than that. I can calculate it 3 times this value on here. And oh, new line expected. All right. Oh, I put the X in there, sorry. Three times. Let's go and check it. There it is there. It automatically did the multiplication of my value, added that in there. So again, what you want to do is just sort of experiment with arcade a little bit. There's a lot of things that you can do, and it is a very simple structure that you're putting together. A lot really forgiving. For example, on here, I'm showing how we can actually use some of the text formatting tags for labels to go and make something bold in here. Now, this is in fact the tag here, and then we have to add the string, then we have to close out that tag. So let's go here again. Let's go here and say that this is we'll make this value here in bold. And the tag and be there. Here, I forgot the plus sign. Again, from a labeling standpoint, it's a really good way to go and sort of play around a little bit and experiment with what you're doing here, how to put these things together. If I want to go and add a new line in here, we'll then go and put the 210 on the new line. So just to give you some examples, there's all sorts of elements in here. Once you understand sort of how to put strings together, we can then figure out, well, what else do we want to do with this? For example, from a text formatting standpoint, yes, we can use the text here. We can also use things such as rounding, a round function on side of this numeric value, and tell it how many decimal places to round it to. So let's go back here and tell it that instead of putting this value in here, go ahead and take the shape area field, all right, the shape area field, and apply this and give us the shape area field. We can then go and say, take that shape area field, round it, round that value to 2 decimal places. It goes and rounds it to 2 decimal places. And then we can say, add on to that some text which shows us what it is. And when you're starting, I highly recommend almost every time you make a change in here, you click on here just to make sure, and then apply it as you see these text strings being built up. Arcade, and you'll notice this is a single line here that's getting returns here and here. Like I said, it's a very, very forgiving scripting language. It's amazing how forgiving it is on here. What you can do within this simple language. So this is rounding. Another thing is often you want to go and test to see if there's a value in an attribute field. All right, so for example, there is a test, a function that says, is this attribute field empty? And it will return yes or no in here. All right, so you can go and test to see whether something is existing in that value or not. That's a really good condition to test for. And then secondly, here's another one, which is good because this goes in and replaces the sort of standard if this or else, or if else. And IIF is you put the condition in, and then you tell it what to do if it's true, and then tell you what to do if it's false. In one single line, you can go and tell it, if this is true, do this, and if it's not true, do this. It's a good. Once you get in here and look at the language and look at the features that's in here, how to go and define a statement. Comments are double slashes. How to put multiple comments or multiple statements on a single line. You can use the semicolon to do that. And it will return what these values are. Multiple lines, you can put multiple lines in here, and you can have functions and dictionaries and arrays and all sorts of things in here. But it's just sort of going through. I really recommend this arcade reference. I really refer to it a lot. There's a lot of functions as far as what you can do. Let me see. There's operators. You know, how do you add things, subtract things, multiply, divide, increment by one, decrement by one. Here's how you assign things. Here's how you compare things. On here, logical operators. In here, how to do if-else statements, how to do loops on here. So there's a lot in there, but the good thing is you're not going to really break anything. It's just it's a scripting language is all it is. You can use Arcade not just for labels. Again, you can use it for symbology. And inside the parcel fabric, there's actually some symbology that uses this. Matter of fact, if we go here and look at the parcel fabric, if we look at the symbols and the symbology for here, there's actually a custom Arcade code that's written that says, let's see if we can understand what this is saying now. This is saying that if the value of the seed, if the seed attribute field is not equal to 1, that's an exclamation point equal to. If it's not equal to 1, then return 0. Otherwise, return 1. And then what we have is we have it creating symbology relative to the values in the is seed field. And if it's not 1, it's a tax parcel. If it's 1, it's a seed. That's how they go and symbolize it on that, just by this one simple Arcade line. If it's a seed, symbolize it this way. If it's not a seed, don't do it. Do it a different way. So that's a good example of how you can use it for symbology. There's a whole bunch of other cases in here. You can use this to go and create complete classes of things depending upon the numeric values on there, using Arcade to evaluate them. And again, it uses this $ feature, and that's a global variable. It's used throughout Arcade on here. Again, global variables, they're easily accessed. They have the $ in front of them. Yeah, we don't need any of those. Okay, so here's a good example of many of the global variables that are in here. $ feature. Evaluate that feature that we're looping through and do something as a result of the attributes that are associated with that. $map. Check to see if this specific layer is in my map. $layer, name of the layer. $data store, the geodatabase in which this is created. This is a really interesting one here, $original feature. This is one that they created after some of us said, shouldn't there be a way for us to test whether something has changed, whether the geometry has changed or not? That's $original feature. If the original feature is not the same as it was, go and do something. $view scale, $value, $measure. These are all global variables inside of Arcade. The real value of Arcade is that it's not like VB script. There's things that you can do. You can do a complete evaluation. You can do an intersection of 2 different feature classes and see how much of each of one feature class is in a different one. A prime example of this, I'm going to pull up one that we use all the time on web maps. Let me move this out of the way a little bit. Here. Let's see. That's not it. sorry, live demos. Yeah. All right, this is a web map on ArcGIS Online. And what we're doing with this web map is we actually have an arcade script that's embedded in the pop-up so that when I click on a parcel, what it's actually doing is it's calculating, calculating each of the soil types that are located inside this parcel that I clicked on. So it's telling me the total area of the parcel is this. The total area of the soil types is that, and that there are 5 different types of soils on here. And these soils is giving me the acreage and the percentage of all of these individually. So it's doing a complete, what we traditionally in GIS called an intersect. It's doing that on the fly as we're going and looking at that. So it's one of those things where arcade can be used in more than just labels, more than just field calculations. You can do this to go and make sure that you can analyze things between other things. And that's actually what um, some of the attribute rules that Dean and the ORMAP team have put together is they're calculating what's inside of what. They're doing intersections on the fly using arcade. And that's using some of the geometry. Some of the real simple geometry, for example, is they can return back using an arcade expression what the value of that object, that feature that you're going and analyzing. We'll experiment with this right now. So we'll go back over here and go back to our labels and we'll say, okay, let's look at let's break it off here. And let's go and analyze what is the area of the $ feature. And let's show us what the acres are of the feature in here that's using just this one expression. Is just going to go and tell me what the area is of this parcel. All right. And it will now go and show us that that's the area. Notice I don't have any separators in here. Let's go and put some separators in here and take that same area. All right, there's the area here. So let's go and round it up. Round it to 2 decimal places. All right, there's the 2 decimal places. And let's build on this again. All right, so I can go and build this expression up so that with a very simple expressions, I can pull in and find out geometry about the features that are in my feature class. I can analyze them. I can determine what they are. If I didn't want acres, instead, I want it to reflect if I could spell, in feet. Again, I can say, well, give it to me in square feet instead, and will give me square footage. I then would have to go and change this to go and say square feet instead. So I didn't really have to go and do any calculations because it's doing it all on the fly as we're going through. It's giving me the values of the individual features as it's evaluating each one of them. All right, so I can do things on the fly with Arcade, like return the X value of there, return the Y value, return the Z value of it, see if it equals this. See, and this is one that ORMAP used a lot. See if the centroid is inside of another polygon. All right, it can be used to, again, do all sorts of updates of the geometries in here. And here's some of the default values that you could return out of the object, out of that geometry that you're analyzing. You know, see if it's within something. Questions yet? Any questions? Nope. Okay. So this is the single feature we're working against. A feature set is a layer. It's a way to go and analyze a group of things. And so what we can do is we can call a layer by an ID if in fact it's on a portal, or we could call it by the name, or we can call a layer by the relationship name if in fact there's a relationship class set up, and we could set a filter against it. All right, so when we start building on these things, let's start looking at some of the components in here. Let's look at this attribute fields that ORMAP has put together. Here's calculate the calculated area. So on here, what they've done is they've said, let's calculate the calculated area field and use the expression, the area of the $ feature acres. And that's being done when they create a polygon or when they change a polygon or update the polygon. That update can be a geometry update, or that could be an attribute update. Update fires off anytime a change occurs in the feature itself. So let's get a little bit more intense and look at this. This is actually getting the map number from the map index and filling it out into the map number field. All right. So what it's doing is it's commenting here that it's going to get the map number from the index polygon. So it's setting up a variable, and this is an index variable, and it basically is calling the layer that's stored in the geodatabase that's called map index, and he's pulling the map number out of there. And what he's doing is he's intersecting that layer that he set up here with the centroid of the polygon that's being evaluated. So when he builds a polygon, he's taking the centroid of it and he's intersecting this layer here that he's referencing here, and he's just making sure it's inside. And then he's saying, if I've got more than one, let's at least take the first one, assuming there's at least one. Let's take the first one. And if in fact there are none, just return the error message that says, I didn't find any index. If in fact the index number that he found is got no value in it, just return the error message that, I didn't even find a number in there. Even though you intersected a polygon, it wasn't filled in. And then it's just returning the index number, the number that's on that map index. That's all that does. But it's ultra powerful because now you can set it up so that this expression occurs every single time that something is created or it's modified in any way, so that it updates these values constantly as you're going through. So that's this get map number on here. Well, actually, if you look, because of the way I use this data, it's not normally the way most ORMAP people will use it. I actually disabled that rule and said, no, don't run that thing while I'm doing all my demos because I don't always have that there and I don't check on that. So I wind up disabling a lot of these rules when I'm doing the demos for you. Dean, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Gabe and Jeff, this is what we ran into, is that you saw that it was returning those error codes when what you were not in the map index polygon, but it stops. And then the other rules don't go on. And so that was where we took those error messages out so that when you had to do it that way, the rest of it would still process. So how you put errors into your attribute rules can be a big gotcha. You just got to be careful and make sure you don't have unintended consequences.
So just to let you know, Dean, because we've run into this a lot, what we tend to do is we don't actually return an error message. We just return it without returning any value. So we just
Exactly.
comment out from that point after, so it doesn't stop all the others from executing. We just comment it out there. So in here,
Yep, that's exactly what I did for Jeff and Gabe in Josephine County.
yeah, so just comment that out. And from that point forward, notice it changed colors, which means it's not going to execute that at all. And it just allows you to, yeah, don't give an error message, but don't return anything. Don't give us anything back. Just say, okay, boom. And it winds up becoming a null value in there. But yeah, that's so again, it's good coding. And unless you want to go and put all kinds of error checking in there, all sorts of it, because it's not a fatal error, that's just something that, yeah, it didn't do it here. But using Arcade, it allows you to go and put together these very, very useful actions that fire off a lot. And so you can handle things like, again, getting county values, getting ORMAP numbers, getting all of these out. Here's one that's interesting is that on this one, this is a demo, and what it's going to do is going to copy the map number value into the name field. We use this a lot, and that we'll have where someone will go and create one, and they also want to do this other one here. So they want to create that other value, which may or may not be exposed, so that it saves the mapper from having to go and enter these values all the time on here. So that's it. Basically, it's just copying one value. So it's copying the attribute that's in the map number attribute field, and it's pasting it into the number field. And it's doing it anytime you create it or update it. Boom, that's all it's doing. So it's retrieving the map number here, and then at this step, it's actually copying it into the name field. We use this a lot in that some of our clients still have numbers that they store, some of which have dashes or delimiters in there, some of which are only a certain portion of a bigger number. So sometimes they'll take a number and they'll take the left 3 values or the left 4 values and paste them into a number field. And it's a good way to go and save, again, to save that mapper from having to do all of the calculations on here. All right. So that's about all I want to do with attribute rules or with Arcade. Just know that it's a really powerful scripting language. And why you can do a lot of things in Python, why you can do a lot of things in VB script. Arcade, because it is ubiquitous and it's everywhere, it's one of those things where I could take code from a label expression and copy it and put it onto a pop-up and it would still work. The only thing you want to watch out for is when you move it from a file geodatabase into an enterprise, because then the naming of the attribute fields sometimes changes, like the shape fields and things like that. And because if it goes to portal, gets published into a web service, it no longer gets referenced by a name, but get referenced by an ID. So just want to be here, some little nuances there, but it is, you can use it anywhere. All right. Attribute rule. So what is an attribute rule? An attribute rule is in fact a small bit of code that gets fired off anytime certain triggers are enacted. And there's a couple of types of attribute rules. There's a calculate attribute rule, which is what we've been looking at mostly. And what these do is these calculate values, these copy values, they intersect things between there, and they sort of calculate the value that gets stored in an individual attribute field. Simple thing. It replaces the old attribute assistant is the easiest way to go and say it. However, we want to make sure that you're aware of certain nuances. And Dean's mentioned this before. Attribute rules are stored in the geodatabase. They are not an external table. They are stored in the geodatabase and they are attached onto the feature class. So if you have a geodatabase and you put an attribute rule on there, ORMAP does not understand what that thing is. ORMAP does not understand what that thing is. So once you put an attribute rule on a feature class, ORMAP can no longer access that data. Just can't do it. Doesn't know what to do with it. It's foreign. The structure is completely alien to it. So just be aware that if you're going to play around with attribute rules, don't do it on something that's going to be accessed by ORMAP. Inside of Pro, definitely understands how to do it. And attribute rules work on file geodatabases in Pro. They work on Enterprise. They work on, on ArcGIS Online. They work all over on Pro, but not in ORMAP. Okay, so calculate rule is the one that universal, everybody likes. A constraint rule is an interesting rule in that you set a rule and you tell it that this is the rule I want followed. If it does not follow that rule, it stops the execution of whatever function is in there. So for example, if I tell it that I want the map name to be X, and an editor tries to go and edit it, and map name is Y, it will not let that mapper finish. They have to comply with that rule before any progress gets on. It constrains the editing. It says, no, you have to go and fix it so the rule is valid. And we have some clients that say, okay, so one of the rules, if we're doing subdivisions and lots and tax parcels, one of the rules is that you can't have a lot that's not inside of a subdivision. Seems like a logical business rule, but you want to be careful because what happens, and we've already said it, you can build things 9 different ways. What happens if that mapper decides instead of building the subdivision first, they're going to build the lots first and then merge them into subdivision? Well, if I had a constraint rule that says a lot has to be inside of a subdivision, and it did an intersect to see whether there was a subdivision underneath it, it would stop that mapper from doing that and say, you can't do that anymore. Constraint rules. Interesting idea. I can tell you that virtually 100% of the clients that we've implemented some constraint rules on their data, they quickly turned around and say, oh no, we can't do that. No, we want to be able to have that flexibility to do it however we want. So, Dean, quickly, have you implemented any constraint rules on anything?
No,
Yeah.
no way. I have enough trouble with attribute rules that are doing calculate. There's just, so many unintended consequences. I have been sliding since doing validation rules that I showed earlier today. I'm sliding everything to validation rules for so many things instead of constraint. I'd rather not interrupt the process, let them do what they're doing, and then have them run validation and say, where are things that are causing me problems?
So here's an interesting thing, an interesting aspect. The calculate rule is proactive. As you do something, it automatically goes and does it. All right. The constraint rule is proactive. It's going to prevent you from making or from introducing an error into your data set. It's going to prevent you from doing that. A validation rule is not proactive, it is reactive, meaning it's going to let you make errors. And it's not even going to tell you until somebody decides to validate that rule. It's similar to topology rules. Topology allows you to go and create errors, and it won't stop you from doing it. It's only after the validation that you can identify those errors. And it's the same thing. So inside of here, when you think about what rules you might want to go and put in place, recognize these first two, the calculate rules and the constraint rules, are going to prevent you from making errors, but that might be more than you want. Whereas the validation rule allows there to be errors, but uses it to identify. So in trying to figure out where you want to impose these business rules, where you want these things to happen, think about whether you want to do it before the error gets introduced into your data or after the error gets introduced. And as Dean was saying, because he has no control over when it gets done, he's using attribute rules to check the validity of the attribution that's in there. So just as a hint, one of the things he's doing is he's looking at this a lot of times and saying, is that field filled in? Is it empty or not? He's also doing more in that he's looking at the values of the domains and seeing, is this value in the domain or is it not in the domain? So these are the types of things he's doing. Same code for attribution, or excuse me, same arcade code, but he's putting it in different places to figure out, how do I check for that, or when do I check for that? Anything you want to add to that, Dean?
Yeah, is it okay if I share my screen?
Please.
Let me just get somewhere real quick.
I will stop sharing.
Oh, okay. You see that cute map? That's all the Polk County tax lots. So while Frank was going over his stuff in the last half hour, 45 minutes, I took that error checking tool and I referenced our SDE database rather than the individual township test and reran the import process and reran the error checking. So this is something that anybody can do. And in fact, I can run the reports just like I ran before and have it tell me where I'm messing up. And it is now running on the exported data out of SDE. And it's going to run through the whole database, which I'm just amazed at, that all of those domains, all of those attribute rules, all of that validation is all going to work. And obviously it goes a little slower, so we're not going to get it in a minute or so, but it works within 5-10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. And I now have produced the entire data set minus the property table that Tom at Department of Revenue needs. And I can run the validation tools. So I'm bringing this afternoon to our cartographers and saying, look, let's not run the validation rules on the service. Let's not mess around with messing with SDE, and let's not mess around with creating a transaction and all that sort of stuff. Let's just grab the data out, and then it's on the local drive for that particular person to play with, and start looking at their data and trying to evaluate why, because it's just grabbed it all out and applied those rules. And that way I didn't have to create a version, mess around with anything, but it's just a very quick way for them to test. So again, I can run all those validation rules on, know where they are, make a table, join it back to my version, and go look for errors in the production environment. So kind of some fun things to do. But all of the things that Frank has showed you with the attribute rules, with the arcade expressions, it's all the same stuff. It just comes right across. And that's really the value of running arcade and some of this sort of thing.
So, Dean, I haven't shared my screen again yet. So
Yeah.
are you familiar with Data Reviewer? Isn't this what Data Reviewer is doing? You set up basically validation rules and says these things have to happen. It has to have values in here. Isn't that kind of what Data Reviewer is doing?
That's what Data Reviewer is doing. But I didn't have Data Reviewer when I played around with it originally. And
You didn't pay it. This please, well, this is going to get shared out there. So I'll be quiet. I'll
so
be
I
quiet.
can say it. Data Reviewer was a cost issue that we elected not to go forward with. And the difficulty for us in the ORMAP Tools Committee is that I can't mandate that every county in the state buys Data Reviewer. And honestly, creating those rules and everything else, those were all done during this class. So over the last 4 half days, while you were talking and I was listening, I wrote all the domains and I wrote all the attribute rules to go through. It's just so simple to do. And once you get into the flow of it. So, and the nice thing about this is every county can get a copy of this and then make it work their way.
And the nice thing is that is completely included, no additional cost in ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah.
Free there. You just have to
I'm-
learn how to
I'm-
use this functionality.
Yeah, I'm having that discussion with the state right now because they're like, well, Dean, aren't you duplicating? And they went off and bought Map One or some other rule-based system and all sorts of things. I've got a person hired and she's writing in this big rule table. I'm like, going, look, this was probably less than 8 hours worth of work to write the arcade. And actually for me to type the stupid domains in because we didn't have them. And this is just not that difficult. And obviously, this is something that everybody can have in their system and customize it because arcade is just that simple to do. As an example, MapRel code. We don't do MapRel code until we add the attribute or the values from rel code after the fact. Well, I'm just going to disable that rule. And then when I'm looking for errors, I don't have to mess with it. So, and that's, I think, the power of arcade and messing around with this, with the validations. Because if they're not applicable, I just turn them off. And I just keep going back to, as an example, what the state is doing. And they've got much, much more robust requirements than we ever have at the local county. So they need to do a lot more stuff, not taken away from theirs. But I don't want to use their tools because same way I don't want to use Data Reviewer. I want us all to not require extra things. This is all just built in. And literally, I did not know how this worked on Friday. And now it works for validation. So, yeah.
Good.
Goes
Good.
quick.
I'm glad. I'm impressed. Matter of fact, I might steal that concept because
It's
yeah,
it's very fun.
Yeah.
And I'll post that in because what it does is in the 7.4 data set, that whole directory just plugs right into it. And so it just adds right on to the whole piece. And so I'll get it out there and you can take a look. And because it's just pointing at the sample data set, everything else is built. So it's a fun little project. Who knows what excites, GIS folks. Sorry. Thanks, Frank.
I agree. I agree. We all get fired up over one thing or another. So let me just say, that's actually my last slide right there, the attribute rules. And we sort of have some free time now. We can explore what we want. Um, it's really up to you. The way I tend to set and sort of structure my training is I have a minimum set of topics that we're going to go over. And then it comes down to what interaction do I have with the people who are in that class? How many different tangential values do we go over? That sort of thing. Um, you've been a very quiet group, and you've not caused me to go down very many rabbit holes, even though there's been a lot of detail. So the question I have here is, are there rabbit holes that you want to go through? Dean and I have talked about, um, Dean and I go back and forth about annotation, and I can share you with the parcel fabric. Annotation is not in the parcel fabric. All right, let's start with that. And depending upon the size of the organization, going and publishing a parcel fabric within a multi-editor user environment, annotation, because of the way web services are set up, annotation can sometimes be very chatty and very slow to react. Now, Dean has told me that the clients up in Oregon, you really haven't had this issue. I can share with you in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Florida, it's a big issue. So I'm glad you didn't experience it yet, but annotation, again, this is this whole concept of, are you cartographers? Are you digital curators of land records? What are you that you're doing? And how do you set up your data model?
Frank, I do have a question, and it's something that I have not been able to figure out.
Okay.
And I know it's not a fabric one, but when I'm adding a piece of annotation and I am using the follow feature to follow a line. And so if you pick any one of those Kogo lines and you go to follow it, the follow buttons are disabled, and whether they work or not is not always clear. So if you just say create, let's go, I don't know if that's got, yeah, does that have bearing and distance on it?
This has got a bearing and distance here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's just anno 400, create an anno 400 or an anno 400 bearing and distance, which is level 34 or symbol 34. And now hit follow.
And
It's the
you can tell how little I use.
So just slide out. So go back to bearing and distance, the template, and it's the fourth one over above the line. That one.
This one.
Okay. And I don't know if you've got tax lot lines being selectable.
Again, this is your map configuration.
Yeah, that's
so
okay. Well, just let's go to third tab over and grab tax lot lines. Yep, it is. Perfect. So what you're supposed to be able to do is now if I point at that line, so just click on the line, and now I can slide it along. Isn't that cool?
Yep.
Okay, so let's point at it again and do it again. And you see how you're sliding, and I think you actually have the polygon selected, but let's see in the add above the green check, the flip, there's 3 buttons there on the little edit bar. And they don't always work. And in fact, why are they shaded out? It's like it's wrong.
This is the flip annotation. This is the toggle the
Toggle angle
angle.
always works. Toggle side doesn't always work. Now go to flip, which is the top one in the little deal. And even though it's toggled off, it's now working. Obviously you haven't played around with it, but I don't know why those buttons are not shaded, and the flip one never works.
Hmm.
But it's a great tool that Gabe and Jeff found, and that's annoying.
We
Because
use that tool all the time.
See, flip doesn't work at all, and it's something you use in ArcMap a lot, and it works fine. So what I found, Gabe, is that if you select the text,
So you say this flip doesn't work?
not always, it's working now, so go to flip, and there it worked. Okay, we're done, Gabe. It worked. See you later.
So what version are you running? What version of ArcGIS Pro?
3.2.
3.2, huh? This is 3.2 also.
I had the same problem in 3.1.
So I can tell you, all right, I can tell you what my wife says. Whenever she's having a problem, she calls me in and I do it and it works. She said, it always works when you do it. It's the same thing. It always works when I do it. I don't know what you're having a problem with.
I think we're done, Gabe. I'm cool. I don't know why it doesn't always work. I've been doing this now with Zach at Polk County with our cartographer. And like I say, sometimes we turn it on and I cannot find any settings on this. In fact, I can find very little documentation on it. But it's working fine, so there's no point. But it is
Yeah.
pretty fun because if you've got that hooked up with an arcade expression to actually grab the bearing and distance, you can petition your stuff like crazy. It's just really fun.
Yeah. I'm not sure why. Notice I do know this, that not with Anno, but if I have, and I don't know what you've got turned on here. Pass out lines, making them that slot lines here. Group by community type, okay. Text lot lines. If I go to parcel lines here, I do like this, that I can snap to features on here. And that's something that we use an awful lot of, in that I can snap to the midpoint of a specific line that I'm over. Over here, I can right click and I can say snap to this and give me some variables in here. So there's a lot built in to the
Yep.
edit tools.
If you
And
select,
but
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
If you select the two upside down pieces of text and then hit the Anno tool, the Anno edit tool, which is up at the top. It's one of the modify feature bars, way up at the ribbon.
Oh, yeah. This one here?
No, it's to change annotation. It's an annotation edit tool. So it's in the modify features group. Yeah, and I think you slide down.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I know which one we're talking about now.
Okay.
That's this one.
Yeah. And now right click back over on text. It's the same concept. And there's a flip.
Yep.
I don't see the flip.
I don't see the flip either. Is it because I have two pieces selected?
I don't know, Frank. I have gotten flip to work at times.
There's the follow. There's curve. On stack. I don't see flip in here though.
I'll find that out and send it to the class. I apologize for
Yeah.
jumping in.
Yeah.
But there is a right click that lets you do some of that. And And maybe it's in 3.1. But I've had flipped work that way as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't use annotation much at all.
And in fact, in the Esri documentation, it says to use flip that way. I'll have to search, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. So comments, questions? What have we got? Anything?
Can you send the link to that function reference for Arcade?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, let me get out of here. So, the actual language, and this is here, the home. So if you actually look here to developers.arcgis.com/arcade. And I would just start at the home section, and here is the function reference, all the different types of functions that you have, the geometry functions, the logical, the math function, the text functions, playground. This allows you to actually go and test code out. When you first start, it's a good thing to use. I can tell you, Dean doesn't use it anymore. I don't use it anymore. But when you're first starting, it's like, okay, so where are you getting this from? And it's a way to sort of play around a little bit. But I always use the home. I use the function reference when I'm looking for something. What am I looking for? How do I pull out, Dean? How do you pull out functions from a domain? Right? Yeah.
Another way I look at it, Scott, that works very well for me is that I will just Google and I'll say ArcPro, Arcade, domain, and it'll give me choices to get to these pages. And that way, sometimes I get a little lost in the function reference as to which is a function and which is not, and some of those sorts of things. And Google, they've got Google searches on Arcade works very well.
Yes. Yes. Also, just sort of to share this with you, this is there is a community page for attribute rules. Yes, so that if you want to know how to do certain attribute rules and looking for certain code, there is a community page for that. And if you look at community.asri.com, it is attribute rules. And like Dean, I am out on the community page for Parcel Fabric, for attribute rules, for ArcGIS Pro. I'm constantly trolling that, attribute rule documents, ideas, questions, videos, all sorts of things. Hussein, by the way, this is the man. This is the man. Hussein is pretty amazing. I remember being at the first holistic testing for the parcel fabric, and one of the second or third day, Hussein came in and gave us a demo of what attribute rules were and what they were going to do with the parcel fabric, and it just blew my mind. It's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? And yeah, this is the guy. If you want to follow anyone, that's the guy there. And he has a lot of really great code for this. Yeah, do this, not that. Attribute rule tips. Okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to do certain things? Yeah, good guy to know. All right, so I'm going to use my version of a metaphor that Dean said, in that often when I look at how much information we provide you during these training classes, I consider you kind of like a sponge. I think that sponge is right now super saturated and it cannot absorb anything else. You're dripping. You're dripping out your ears. You can't take any more else in. And I appreciate that. But I'm going to tell you, if you have any other questions or anything you might want to find out about, please, here is my business card. You can contact me anytime you want. Shoot me an email. I'll respond to you as quickly as I can. I also want to go and tell you and show you that just as ORMAP has a YouTube video, Panda has YouTube. We got about 1,000 subscribers here, and we got 103 videos on here. Just about anything you want to find out for Pro, for the parcel fabric is all in here. We have, let me just look here. Let's do a search on Arcade. And in fact, we have, I think, 5 or 6 different videos specifically about Arcade. We did a complete series on them. So, yeah, every time I go and mention Arcade in here, that's what you'll see in here. So, please go in and so we don't monetize our YouTube video. It's just a way for us to distribute this stuff out. We don't do marketing on any of that. It's just, this way you get notified. If you want to start participating twice a month, we have live workshops that we work on. And if you want to attend those things live, we have workshops and we have schedules here. If I look at the workshops page on our website, we have a place where you can sign up for a monthly newsletter that we will tell you what's going to be on the YouTube or what's going to be in the workshop, what we're going to go and review, and what's coming up, give you tips and tricks every month on something. Again, we don't use it for marketing. We don't do it for anything else. It's mostly about how can you get more and more people to understand how to use ArcGIS Pro and the parcel fabric. There is events. I don't think we've got anything scheduled here. We don't. It's going to be in March. We do have a friend of mine, Ned Cake from Tallahassee, Leon County, is going to be talking about ArcGIS Online and how small organizations can leverage ArcGIS Online. Ned is another one of the people that I use all the time. He's a huge breadth of knowledge. He's taught me a lot about Arcade, how to use it, how to set it up in web maps. It's always fun to go and talk with Ned for a while. So, and Dean actually did one, didn't you? You did a
And
workshop.
I talk too fast as per usual.
So
Hey, I did get the text flip to work.
good.
So,
Did you?
If you select the text and then go to modify, and if you do the annotation and then select the text, there is a flip. So don't have anything selected. And if you just go and if you just no before, yeah, now can you right click? Flip annotation near the bottom.
Oh, there it is there.
There it goes. So it is, one of the things they can do is it would be upside down if they placed it right. Then you can go select them after the flagged and flip them. So that's a workaround for now. And I will try to pursue why those are grayed out and why they sometimes don't work. So thank you for showing that, Frank.
Yeah.
And
Good.
for doing this, we really appreciate it. Like 4 classes is a lot of classes. So thank you. And I'm so glad ORMAP funds this kind of thing because like I said, there's a lot of information to learn. Really
I'm very
appreciate
appreciative and thank you for the opportunities. And it's just, again, Panda is about trying to help other people understand how to go and use some of these things. And yeah, thank you. Thank you again. All right. Any other comments? Any other questions? I am going to ask you one more time now. One of the things that I always try to figure out, because I am an educator more than anything else, I've taught at the local college. I teach workshops and all through the country. What do you feel worked with this, and what didn't work with this? This way, Dean and I can understand it and try to make it better the next time. What can we? What worked? What did you most appreciate of this? Dean's already said he likes the transcripts. He's going to try and use them more. What else works?
I enjoyed the overview of all the tools and the depth of them all. For me, it was kind of overwhelming because of how green I guess I am with it all. And when it got into the weeds a little bit about how things work in the background of it, I was lost for portions of it. But I did appreciate, I didn't know any other way that Jeff and I would be able to experience and see all the tools in Fabric. This is really our first go around, first look at it. And so it was great for us for that. I also am really grateful that this is recorded and we have the notes to go through, because I've already, even yesterday afternoon, I started going back and looking at some things, because for me, it's hard to digest so much so quickly. And you're really good about asking, you know, if somebody has any questions, but for me, it takes me a minute to digest it and figure out what's happening. And I learn a lot better hands-on. And it was a lot of lecture, which was harder for me personally. But I know that, you know, thanks for sending your email so we can contact you if we need it. And just going back through the videos again and getting more hands-on stuff with, you know, in Pro, I think is going to be helpful for me. But
so that's an interesting suggestion, and Ian and I have kind of talked about it. Should we make this more interactive, where you're actually trying to follow some of these examples? Would that be a better use of your time or our time?
for me personally, yes, because that's how I learn best. You know, just like you said, you break things and that's how you learn. So for me, it's similar in that regard. Like, I don't know what I don't know, and if I'm not doing it, I'm not going to be learning it as quickly. So that's just my learning style. So for me, that would be helpful.
Somebody else?
There is a lot of material though. And when you start trying to do it interactively, that I think that really slows it down. So trying to cover all of the material,
Yeah.
you know, that's the trade-off. You know,
That's exactly the trade-off, Scott. And even to the point where Dean and I have talked about it, is this, and this is, believe it or not, this was just an introduction. There are so many more topics that we could have covered with this. Was this too much material for these 4 days? Or, I mean, should we have reduced this even more, and slowed it down, made a little bit more interactive if possible? I mean, that's again one of the questions, as far as how do we make it more meaningful each time or every time we do something like this? Yeah, I'm not sure the answer.
The power of the program makes it difficult to not include all that information. From what I picked up as you and Dean went through just the basic tools, basic premises, and then the arcade behind things that can help. The software can do so much with any given tool that it's difficult to cut down all that information. I appreciated it. I also appreciated that you guys emailed out the access to the little tax lot of Dean's from ORMAP. I've just been playing around with it while you've been showing these tools, trying to figure out how to use them, which helped for me. I didn't always get it to work out, but I understand that there's so much to each of these aspects of the software that I don't even know if there would be a good way to do it, but I definitely appreciated you just throwing it all out there, and the fact that these are recorded. Anything that I missed, I can go back and listen, and I'm sure I'll be listening to it a lot, trying to figure out more of this, especially when our county gets to this. Um, it it showed the possibilities that could be used, which I think is huge, especially when you start getting to that point and wanting to push those possibilities. Knowing that that information is even there, even if I don't comprehend all of it, is very useful.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew.
Were it not recorded and were there not a transcript, then yes, I would say it was too much, but I can go back and review, which is what I will need to do, but that's very helpful to go back and see what we've covered again. So that's a great plus there.
Yeah, Frank, I too appreciated all the tools, like how you went over so many of them. And I've been doing GIS for a long time, and a lot of them I weren't even, I mean, I know some are specific to Pro, but even some in ArcMap that I just wasn't even aware existed. So I really liked that portion of it. And as far as the hands-on, that would be good, but I do like the recording because then I can go back and then I can play with it and figure out how to use it now that I know it's even an option. So I really liked that as well. And that it was real tax lot data. I mean, that's what we deal with. So some of the other classes I've been in, I've enjoyed and I've learned, but I like this, that it's actually really pertinent to what I do every day. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think it was Scott that reminded me that often I do things and you don't see my hands. That so you don't necessarily see with the keystrokes that I take or how I did something on here. And many times I assume, oh, they know how to do this, and maybe you don't know how to do it. And I have to remind myself, oh, make sure that you explain as much as possible in here. And that's where it becomes overwhelming. There's just so much in here. Yeah.
Frank, if I had, in my opinion, some input, I would say perhaps a Panda 1A learning session, and then maybe at a later time when we're ready, a Panda 2B. This was all thrown together and it was amazing, but like the other said, it's like, thank goodness for the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I got.
Yeah, it's interesting. Next week, I'm going to be in Green Bay for some Wisconsin land information people. They are the Wisconsin portion of ORMAP. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing an introduction to the parcel fabric, and it's very simple. And then in the afternoon, we have advanced topics in here. So the first one is just sort of the introduction of concepts, how this works. And then the second one is, okay, let's dig into it now that you're using it for a while. And it takes time. It takes time to sort of get acclimated to the tools, to the concept even of how this thing works. And you're right. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Yeah.
And where did you come up with the name Panda?
Okay. I'm going to go in and I'm going to make you do some reading. If you go out to Panda Consulting, all right, just Panda Consulting. Yeah, it's just my YouTube site, or not YouTube. PandaConsulting.com. If you go here and if you go to About Us, let me see here. Well, About Us and about Panda Consulting. And in here you have our name. I'll give you the shortened version of this. Before I went out on my own, I worked for the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation for 25 years. I worked for a nonprofit, and I was their land information director. I was their surveyor. I was their survey contract administrator. I wound up becoming their GIS administrator, and then eventually their director of land information. And we had implemented GIS at that time. And after 25 years, they decided to sell all of their land and to just purely focus on the philanthropic side. John D. MacArthur was one of the last land barons here in Florida. He owned 200,000 acres of land in 20 different counties. He owned another 200,000 acres land in 20 different states. And it was our job to keep track of all of it. And so we did that back in the 1980s with GIS. We were sort of, out on the vanguard of how to actually use GIS to manage land information and land records and manage it as a portfolio, as an investment that you go and grow. Anyway, 25 years, they decided to close up. At the end of it, they said, hey guys, thank you all for helping us. Go have a great life. Do it. You're out. Yeah. So I decided to take what I had learned at MacArthur during all that time and form a company and try to help others with that. My name, I didn't want to use any of my name in the consulting. And so I was trying to come up with a name that reflected sort of my attitude, which is that we're here to help one another, and that what we need to do is we need to make sure that we all understand that we're one tribe. We're not even nations. We're just a tribe of people. And I originally was going to call it Pangea Consulting, right? And I told my wife that, and as we were trying to figure out what to do, and my wife was like, well, I really don't think I'm going to be able to answer the phone Pangea Consulting 50 or so times a day. I don't even know what it means. So my son, who was 9 at the time, said, Dad, that's a really stupid name. Nobody's going to know what that means. It's like, okay. You know the rule. You don't call something stupid unless you come up with an alternative. And he just took the Pangea and sort of through alliterative processes just came, well, why did you call it Panda Consulting, right? And I was started to say that's a stupid name, and I stopped myself. I said, wait a minute. Everybody loves pandas, right? Pandas are unique animals. I'm kind of a unique animal. The reality is pandas are very vicious, and they don't really interact well in social situations. They have to be careful with that, but I'm not like that. So kind of reflected an environmental consciousness that, I'm trying to save the environment. I'm trying to go and make it sustainable and pull people together. And then the more I thought about it, the more it's like, okay, I could come up with some really unique images. That's kind of neat. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. PANDA could be an acronym. It could be Polygon and Network Data Analysis. Oh, and I told that to my wife and my son, and my son shook his head. He goes, Dad, no. That's not why I said panda. I said, so why'd you say panda? He said, because you look like a panda bear. It's like, oh, that's it. That's it. So that was one of the really smart things I did, whether I realized it or not. So I called it Panda Consulting. People recognize it very quickly. They know what we do, who we are. And so it's not like, oh, GeoNet, anything else. This is Panda. It's a unique name, and I'm very glad. I paid his way through college because he said, so how do I get paid for the name? So I paid his way through college. I said, okay, he now works for us. He's a geospatial technician, and hopefully he can continue to grow, and he's become a GIS person now too. So that's the name. But
For
yeah,
the for the record, I like Pangea.
I did too, but unless you're a geographer, you kind of don't know what, general public doesn't know what it means. But again, if you're ever going out and forming your own company, what you want to do is you want to get a name which people ask you about. And I can't go anywhere with a shirt on without somebody saying, hey, what do you do? if you're a business owner, you want somebody to constantly say, hey, what do you do? You want to be able to go and give that elevator pitch to them no matter what. So I think it was a, a smart thing. People saying, well, do you consult for pandas? And anyway, I love it. It's a good name. Yeah.
So
Non-reflective because we don't have any pandas here in Florida, but
none in a zoo or anything, huh?
yeah.
Oh, well.
Nope.
So I don't know if we have any pandas in Oregon, but one of the things that we potentially could do, and I'd like to hear from the cartographers and yourself, is we could do a follow-up, I've kind of, we could either do it at a summer Osaka. The difficulty with a summer Osaka is that would not give you as cartographers the chance to be sharing the screen and actually doing something. But we potentially could do a workshop follow-up with more topics or review of a process. I know some of you have looked at the video that we did with Jason and ESRI from that team. But we could do something. We have ORMAP, we do have funds. Frank, I don't know if you'd be interested in coming to Oregon or working with on some, if we're not doing it in person, but doing it on a video. Is that something of interest? And cartographers, is this something you'd like to have the potential for that follow-up? And I'm thinking maybe early summer. I guess I'm open. I want to give all of you time to look at this stuff and then come back and say, well, what about this? I want to get us all to a level as cartographers that we all have a really good basic understanding of Pro and Fabric, so no one's left behind county by county. And so I got you captive for another 30 seconds, Frank, and cartographers. First, Frank, does that seem like a possibility?
So let me go and say this. My son, or let me reverse it around. My daughter-in-law grew up in Portland. Okay. And my son is always looking for a reason for the family to go out to Oregon. I'm looking for a reason to go out to Oregon. However, if it doesn't work out, I also do workshops remotely, hybrid workshops like this. Matter of fact, in April, I'm doing one for Montana, in which we're doing a workshop, a full-day workshop on the parcel fabric, and it's going to be interactive, same sort of thing using Zoom. Either way, it doesn't matter. As you can tell, I love talking to people about this technology, about what it can do, how it works, those sorts of things. So yeah, talk about it and see if it's something that's worthwhile for you.
So any thoughts, cartographers?
So
Works for
Yeah.
me. I mean, we've had this class, I think, offered 4 times. And it's kind of a next step, I think, after everybody's kind of working with it for a while to see what's working, what's not, maybe.
yeah, and a lot of the follow-up classes that we do are focused on tips and tricks and techniques. How do you use these tools in certain ways? How do you fix certain things that are wrong with your data? And I know your data is all really good, so we don't have to deal with fixing anything, but that was tongue in cheek, by the way. So yeah, it's a lot of interactive, almost like Ezra used to do at the user conference with the doctor's office. Hey, bring your data in. Let's look at it. Let's fix it. Let's see what's going on and see if we can deal with it that way. So again, it's just open up. I'm not against it. Let's see what we can put together. All right.
Good, thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Dean, again for organizing this and for putting it together. And I'm very appreciative of to you and to ORMAP ORMAP, by the way, and Dean, they are great resources. Use them again a lot. If there's any questions you have for me, just you've got all my contact information there. So thank you again. Enjoy your winter. And hopefully I get a chance to see you again. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks.